Emma's fingers trembled with exhaustion as she scanned items mechanically. Her third double shift this week stealing the last of her energy. Then he appeared, a small boy with haunted eyes, clutching a single candy bar and a crumpled $5 bill. His sneakers were worn through, his clothes a size too small, but it was the quiet desperation in his gaze that pierced through Emma's fatigue like a lightning bolt. As he counted pennies with shaking fingers, constantly glancing toward the exit, a folded paper slipped from his pocket. Emma couldn't explain the overwhelming urge that made her retrieve it, a decision that would shatter her to her knees in the middle of the crowded store and irreversibly entangle her life with 2 abandoned children. The 7 words scrawled in a child's handwriting would awaken something fierce and protective she never knew existed. What heartbreaking secret could make a stranger risk everything for a child she just met? If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share a moment when kindness changed your life in the comments below. Emma's fingers trembled as she punched numbers into the ancient register. 8 hours into her shift, and 3 more to go. The store manager had asked her to stay late again, despite knowing she had already worked 60 hours this week. "Price check on register 3, she called half-heartedly into the intercom, knowing nobody would respond quickly. The customer in front of her, a well-dressed woman with manicured nails and an impatient tap of her foot, sighed dramatically. "Some of us have places to be," the woman muttered, checking her watch. Emma forced a smile, the one she had perfected over years of customer service. "I'm sorry for the delay, ma'am. Someone will be right over." But nobody came. Emma's gaze drifted toward the entrance, where the automatic doors slid open to reveal a small figure. A boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, walked in alone. Something about his hesitant steps caught her attention. He wore a navy blue t-shirt that hung loose on his thin frame, jeans with frayed edges, and sneakers with soles so worn they barely deserved the name. "I'll just go to another register," the impatient customer announced, gathering her items. "Have a nice day," Emma replied automatically, her eyes still tracking the boy as he disappeared down the snack aisle. Emma finished her shift in a daze, muscles aching from standing all day. She considered calling in sick tomorrow. The thought vanished when she remembered her rent was due, and her account balance had just enough to cover it. No room for sick days in her life. 20 minutes before closing, as Emma was counting the bills in her drawer, the boy from earlier approached her register. Up close, she could see his eyes were red-rimmed, his face smudged with dirt, or maybe tears. He placed a single chocolate bar on the conveyor belt and pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket. "Just this, please," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Emma scanned the candy bar. "That'll be $1.29. The boy unfolded the bill with careful fingers, then began counting out coins from his other pocket. Pennies, nickels, and dimes scattered across the counter as his small hands trembled. "I think I have exact change," he said, staring intently at the coins. "My dad says I should always use exact change." Emma noticed purple bruises circling his thin wrists as his sleeve rode up. Her heart twisted. She recognized those marks, the telltale signs of being grabbed too roughly. "Here, let me help you count," she offered gently. The boy flinched when her hand moved toward the coins, but then relaxed slightly as she began sorting them into neat piles. "Looks like you've got exactly $1.29, Emma said, though he was actually short by 37 cents. She quietly added the difference from her own pocket when he wasn't looking. As the boy gathered his chocolate, Emma noticed how frequently he glanced toward the door, as if expecting or fearing someone's arrival. "Are you here by yourself?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. He nodded once, then shook his head. "My dad's outside." The lie was transparent. Emma had been watching the doors. "What's your name?" she tried again. "Jason," he answered after a moment's hesitation. "I'm Emma," she said, offering a genuine smile, not her customer service one. "It's nice to meet you, Jason." Something in his expression softened momentarily. Then, clutching his chocolate bar, he turned to leave. As he pivoted, a folded piece of paper slipped from his pocket, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. "Wait," Emma called. "You dropped something," but Jason was already running, his worn sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor as he disappeared through the sliding doors into the darkening evening. Emma bent down to retrieve the note. She shouldn't read it. It wasn't her business, but something about the boy's frightened eyes and those bruises on his wrists made her unfold the paper. The handwriting was childish, all uneven capital letters pressed hard into the paper. Please. Help my brother and me. Dad hasn't come home in 3 days. We're hungry and scared." Emma stared at the words, reading them again and again until they blurred before her eyes. The paper trembled in her hands, and suddenly she realized what she was seeing. It was a cry for help that Jason hadn't been brave enough to give directly, a desperate plea from a child who had run out of options. She looked up at the doors where he had vanished. Without thinking, Emma closed her register, grabbed her purse from under the counter, and ran. Emma's knees hit the cold linoleum floor before she even realized she was falling. The note crumpled in her fist as memories crashed through her carefully constructed walls. Memories of another hungry child with bruised wrists and desperate eyes. Herself, 20 years ago. "Emma? Emma!" Her manager's voice seemed to come from somewhere far away. "What's happening? Are you all right?" Tom kneeled beside her, his concerned face swimming into focus. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. Customers had stopped their shopping to stare at the cashier having a breakdown in the middle of Register 3. I need to go," Emma whispered, struggling to her feet. "There's a boy. He needs help." "You can't just leave in the middle of your shift," Tom said, though his voice held more confusion than anger. "What boy? What's going on?" Emma's mind flashed to her own childhood. The empty refrigerator, the disconnected utilities, the fear of being discovered and separated from her sister. She had sworn never to ignore a child in trouble, not after so many adults had looked the other way during her own childhood. "I'm sorry," she said, already backing away from the register. "Fire me if you have to." She thrust the note into Tom's hand. His eyes widened as he read it, but Emma was already halfway to the door, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, the early evening air felt cool against her flushed face. Emma spun in a circle, scanning the parking lot. For any sign of Jason, nothing. Panic rose in her throat. What if she was too late? What if he'd already disappeared into the labyrinth of the city? "Jason," she called, her voice cracking. A few shoppers looked up curiously, but there was no response from the boy. Emma closed her eyes, forcing herself to think. Which way would a frightened child go? Home, probably. But where was home? She remembered how Jason had exited through the east doors and turned right. Starting in that direction, Emma jogged past the end of the shopping plaza, past the dry cleaners and the discount shoe store, to the corner. There, she paused, breathing hard. A flash of navy blue caught her eye. Jason's t-shirt, half a block ahead, moving quickly. Emma broke into a run. "Jason, wait!" The boy glanced back, his eyes widening in fear when he saw her. He clutched his chocolate bar tighter and ran faster, turning down a side street lined with aging apartment buildings. Emma followed, ignoring the stitch developing in her side. Her cashier's uniform, khaki pants and a green polo shirt with the store's logo, marked her as an outsider in this neighborhood. A few residents sitting on stoops watched her suspiciously as she passed. "I'm trying to help him," she explained breathlessly to an elderly woman who frowned at her from a ground-floor window. "The boy, do you know where he lives?" The woman's expression remained guarded, but she jerked her chin toward a building at the end of the block. "5th floor, 5C. His daddy ain't been around, though." "Thank you," Emma gasped, pressing a hand to her side as she continued forward. The building loomed ahead, its brick facade crumbling in places, windows patched with cardboard or plastic sheeting. No doorman, no security, just a heavy metal door, with broken buzzers beside faded tenant names. As Emma approached, the door swung open. A teenager exited, giving her a curious glance but holding the door. Emma slipped inside, her heart still hammering. The lobby smelled of mildew and cigarettes, its walls covered in graffiti. The elevator had an out-of-order sign taped across it. 5 flights of stairs. Emma began to climb, her legs protesting. On the 3rd floor, she had to stop, leaning against the wall to catch her breath. The stairwell was poorly lit, with shadows pooling in the corners and mysterious stains on the concrete steps. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. This wasn't like her, impulsively chasing a stranger's child into an unknown building. She could lose her job. She could be walking into danger, but the words on the note flashed through her mind again. "Please help my brother and me." Brother. There was another child. Emma pushed herself off the wall and continued climbing. 4th floor, 5th floor. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she emerged into a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper. Apartment 5C was at the end of the corridor. Emma hesitated, then raised her hand and knocked gently. Silence. She knocked again, louder. Jason, it's Emma from the store. I found your note. I want to help. A shuffling sound came from inside. Then a small voice, not Jason's, but younger. Jason says, "Go away, please," Emma said, pressing her palm against the door. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to call anyone you don't want me to. I just want to make sure you're okay." More shuffling, then whispered consultation. The lock clicked, and the door opened a crack. Jason's suspicious face appeared in the narrow gap, one eye visible as he assessed her. "Why did you follow me?" he demanded, trying to sound tough despite the tremor in his voice. Emma held up the note, now wrinkled from her grip. "Because of this. Because you asked for help. And I couldn't just ignore it." The door opened wider, revealing not just Jason, but a smaller boy behind him, maybe 5 years old with the same dark hair and wary eyes. "This is my brother Mikey," Jason said, his hand protectively on the younger boy's shoulder. "Our dad hasn't come home in 3 days, and we ran out of food yesterday. I didn't know what else to do." Emma felt something crack open inside her chest, a terrible mixture of sorrow and rage and helplessness. But she kept her voice steady as she asked, "Can I come in? Maybe we can figure this out together." After a long moment, Jason nodded and stepped back, allowing Emma to enter their world. The apartment was barely furnished, a sagging couch with mysterious stains, a coffee table with one leg shorter than the others, a small TV that looked at least 15 years old. The kitchenette held a sink, full of dishes and a refrigerator that hummed loudly, its surface covered in faded superhero magnets. "How long has your dad been gone?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the anger building inside her. Jason shrugged, his eyes fixed on the floor. 3 days this time. Sometimes he comes back sooner. "This time?" Emma repeated. "He goes away sometimes." Mikey chimed in, his small voice matter-of-fact. "When he's sad about Mom." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Your mom?" "She died," Jason said flatly. "Cancer. 2 years ago." Mikey nodded solemnly. "She's in heaven with the angels. That's why Dad drinks his special medicine. He says it helps him forget she's gone." Emma swallowed hard. She knew all about special medicine that helped adults forget their responsibilities. Her own mother had preferred pills to alcohol, but the effect had been the same. Children left to fend for themselves. The refrigerator door hung open, revealing a nearly empty interior, a half-empty bottle of ketchup, a container of expired yogurt, and a single beer. The cupboards weren't much better. A box of stale cereal, some crackers, a few cans of soup. "When was the last time you ate? Something proper?" Emma asked. Jason's defensive posture softened slightly. "We had cereal yesterday, but we ran out of milk. And I'm hungry now," Mikey added, his lower lip trembling. Emma looked at the chocolate bar clutched in Jason's hand, the one item he'd managed to buy with their precious few dollars, one candy bar for 2 hungry children. "Do you have any neighbors? Who help you when your dad is away?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. Neighbors who cared would never let 2 young boys go hungry. Jason shook his head. "Mrs. Peterson used to check on us, but she moved away. The new people don't talk to us, and Dad says we're not supposed to tell anyone he's gone," Mikey said, "or they'll take us away to different houses, and we won't see each other anymore." The fear in his voice was palpable. Emma recognized it, the terror of being separated from the only family you had left. She'd lived with that same fear until she aged out of the system at 18. "I'm going to help you," Emma said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "First, we need to get you both something to eat. Are you going to call the police?" Jason asked, tension returning to his thin shoulders. Emma hesitated. Legally, she probably should. These were minors left alone, neglected. But she also knew how the system worked, or didn't work. The boys would be separated more often than not, processed through overworked social services, possibly shuttled between foster homes. Not right now, she decided. First, let's focus on getting you fed and figuring out where your dad might be. Do you know his friends? Places he might go when he takes his medicine? Jason listed a few bars. A friend's apartment across town. Emma took notes on her phone, trying to piece together where their father might have disappeared to. Is there any food I can make for you right now? Emma asked, looking again at the sparse kitchen. Mikey pointed to the canned soup. We still have that. But Jason couldn't open it. The can opener broke. Emma located a dented can of chicken noodle soup. Using a butter knife and considerable effort, she managed to pry it open, then heated it on the ancient stove. The boys watched her every move, as if afraid she might disappear too. While the soup warmed, Emma took stock of the apartment. The bathroom was relatively clean but lacked toilet paper. The single bedroom contained a double bed where the father presumably slept, and a bunk bed for the boys, with mismatched sheets and thin blankets. On a dresser sat a framed photograph of a smiling woman with the same dark hair as the boys, her arms wrapped around a younger Jason and Mikey, all three, laughing at the camera. Beside it, a prescription bottle for oxycodone, the mother's cancer medication, Emma guessed. Now empty, the soup began to bubble. Emma poured it into 2 chipped bowls she found in the cupboard, then cut the chocolate bar in half, giving each boy a piece for dessert. They ate hungrily, slurping the soup and savoring each bite of chocolate. Emma watched them, her mind racing. She couldn't leave them here alone, but she wasn't legally authorized to take them anywhere. She had her own apartment, barely big enough for 1 person, let alone 3, and she had to work tomorrow, assuming she still had a job after walking out mid-shift. "What happens when your dad comes home?" Emma asked carefully as the boys finished eating. Jason's face clouded. "Sometimes he's okay. Sometimes he's angry. Does he hurt you?" The question came out blunter than she intended. Jason looked away, but Mikey answered with childish honesty. "He grabs really hard when he's mad, and he yells a lot." The bruises on Jason's wrists suddenly made horrible sense. Emma made a decision. She couldn't leave them here. Not tonight. "How about you pack some clothes and things you need?" she suggested. "You can stay at my place tonight. It's small, but it's warm and safe. And tomorrow we can try to find your dad." Jason looked skeptical. "We're not supposed to go with strangers. I'm not a stranger anymore," Emma said gently. "I'm the lady from the store who's making you soup. And I promise I'm not going to let anything bad happen to either of you." Mikey had already brightened at the suggestion. "Can I bring Mr. Whiskers?" he asked, holding up a tattered stuffed cat. "Of course you can," Emma assured him. Jason still hesitated, but she could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing the risk of going with her against the certainty of another night alone in the empty apartment. Hungry and afraid. "Okay," he finally agreed, "but just for tonight." As the boys gathered their things, Emma sent a text to her sister, the only person she truly trusted. "Found 2 kids alone, dad missing 3 days, taking them to my place tonight. What do I do?" The response came quickly. "Call CPS immediately." "What are you thinking?" Emma stared at the message, then looked at the boys packing their small backpacks, Mikey chattering excitedly to his stuffed cat about their adventure. She couldn't do it. Not yet, she typed back. "Going to try to find Dad first. They're scared of being separated. I know how that feels." Then she put her phone away and helped the boys zip their backpacks. "Ready?" she asked. Jason nodded, taking his brother's hand protectively. "Ready." Emma's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian house. 1 bedroom, a small living area, and a kitchenette barely large enough for a miniature refrigerator and 2-burner stove. But it was clean, with soft lighting and walls painted a cheerful yellow that Emma had done herself during a rare weekend off. "It's tiny," she apologized as she unlocked the door, suddenly seeing her home through the boy's eyes. But Mikey's face lit up. "It's pretty, and it smells nice." Jason was more reserved, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar space, noting exits and potential dangers, the behavior of a child who had learned to be vigilant. "You can take the bed," Emma told them, gesturing to her bedroom. "I'll sleep on the couch. We can share," Jason offered immediately. "Mikey and I are used to it." Emma smiled at his attempt to be considerate despite his circumstances. "That's very thoughtful, but I think the bed will be more comfortable for you both." She helped them settle in, finding an old t-shirt of hers for Mikey to sleep in, while Jason insisted he was fine in his clothes. The bathroom prompted a minor crisis when Mikey admitted he hadn't brushed his teeth in several days because they'd run out of toothpaste. Emma found a new toothbrush in her drawer and shared her own toothpaste, showing Mikey how to use just a pea-sized amount. While the boys got ready for bed, Emma searched her nearly empty refrigerator and managed to make them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They ate quickly, Mikey with peanut butter smeared across his cheek, Jason with careful precision, as if afraid to make a mess. "What happens tomorrow?" Jason asked as Emma tucked them into her bed, the sheets fresh and smelling of lavender detergent. "We'll try to find your dad," Emma said, choosing her words carefully. "And if we can't, we'll figure something out. Together." Mikey was already drifting off, clutching Mr. Whiskers to his chest, but Jason remained alert, studying Emma's face for any sign of deception. "Why are you helping us?" he asked suddenly. "You don't even know us." Emma sat on the edge of the bed. "When I was about your age, my mom would disappear sometimes too, not for days, but she would forget to come home from work or forget to buy food. My sister and I had to take care of each other." "What happened to you?" Jason's voice was barely a whisper. "Eventually someone noticed," Emma said, the memories still painful after all these years. "We went into foster care, different homes. I didn't see my sister for almost a year. Were the homes bad?" Emma hesitated. "Some were okay, some weren't. The worst part was being separated from my sister." Jason nodded, understanding in his young eyes. "That's what I'm afraid of. If they take us away, they'll split us up. Mikey needs me." "I know," Emma said softly. "That's why I want to try to find your dad first. Maybe he just needs some help." "He wasn't always like this," Jason said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "Before Mom got sick, he was different. He used to take us fishing and help with my homework. But then Mom started getting really tired all the time. And then she went to the hospital and never came home." Emma felt her throat tighten. "That must have been really hard." "Dad cried a lot after the funeral. Then he started drinking his special medicine. He said it made the sadness go away for a little while." Mikey stirred beside his brother, mumbling something in his sleep. Jason automatically reached out to smooth his hair, a gesture so tender it made Emma's heart ache. "You're a good big brother," she said. Jason shrugged, but she could see he was pleased by the compliment. "Someone has to take care of him. You shouldn't have to, though," Emma said gently. "You're just a kid yourself." "I'm 8.5, Jason corrected her, as if that made all the difference. Emma smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. "Very grown up. But still, you deserve to be a kid too." Jason didn't respond to that, his eyelids finally growing heavy. Emma waited until his breathing evened out before quietly leaving the room, pulling the door partially closed behind her. In the living room, she collapsed onto her couch, the events of the day catching up to her. Her phone buzzed, another text from her sister. "Are you insane? You can't just take random children home. What if their father reports them missing? You could be arrested." Emma hadn't considered that possibility. Would the father even notice they were gone? Would he care enough to call the police? And if he did, how would she explain having 2 children who weren't hers? She typed back, "I couldn't leave them alone in that apartment. You should have seen it, Sarah. No food, dirty clothes, scared out of their minds. The little one is only 5. Sarah's response was immediate. "I get it, but this isn't the answer. You need to call CPS first thing tomorrow. Promise me." Emma stared at the message, her sister's voice of reason warring with her own memories of the system. Overworked social workers, foster parents who saw children as paychecks, the crushing loneliness of being separated from the only person who truly understood what you'd been through. "I'll figure it out tomorrow," she finally replied. "They're safe tonight. That's what matters." She put her phone on silent and went to check on the boys one more time. They were both deeply asleep now, Mikey curled against his older brother's side, Jason's arm protectively around him even in sleep. The sight brought tears to Emma's eyes. She had no idea what she was going to do tomorrow, but for tonight, at least, these children were safe, fed, and warm. It would have to be enough. Back on the couch, Emma tried to formulate a plan. She could call in sick to work. She never had before, so Tom might believe her. Then she could try the bars and other places Jason had mentioned, looking for the father. If she found him, then what? Convince a man she'd never met to come home and take better care of his children? And if she couldn't find him, the thought of calling Child Protective Services made her stomach clench. She knew it was probably the right thing to do, the legal thing, but she also knew from bitter experience that the system, for all its good intentions, often caused as much harm as it prevented. Emma's own experience in foster care had been a mixed bag. Some homes decent but impersonal, others neglectful or worse. She and Sarah had been reunited eventually, but only after months of separation that left scars on both of them. The thought of Jason and Mikey going through that same ordeal made her physically ill. Yet what alternatives did she have? She couldn't keep them. She was a single woman working minimum wage at a grocery store, living in a tiny apartment she could barely afford. She had no legal right to these children, no resources to offer them beyond temporary shelter. Emma stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of the boys breathing in the next room. She had acted on impulse, following that note out of the store, and into their lives. Now she had to figure out what came next. With a heavy sigh, Emma reached for her phone and set her alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow would require a clear head and careful decisions. For now, she needed whatever sleep she could get. Emma woke to the sound of whispered voices and small feet padding across her apartment floor. For a moment, she was disoriented, wondering why she was on the couch instead of in her bed. Then yesterday's events crashed back into her consciousness. The boys, the note, the empty apartment. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes, to find Jason and Mikey attempting to pour cereal into bowls they'd found in her cupboard. "Sorry," Jason said when he noticed her watching. "Mikey was hungry. We didn't want to wake." It's okay," Emma assured him, glancing at the clock. 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her alarm. "I need to get up anyway." She helped them with breakfast, grateful she at least had milk and cereal to offer. While the boys ate, Emma called the grocery store, informing them she was sick and wouldn't be coming in today. "This is the first time you've called out in 3 years, Emma," Tom said, concern evident in his voice. "Is this about that kid from yesterday? The one with the note?" "I have a stomach bug," Emma lied, watching Jason help Mikey wipe milk from his chin. "I should be back tomorrow." After hanging up, Emma faced her next challenge: what to do with the boys while she searched for their father. She couldn't leave them alone in her apartment, but taking them with her to bars and potentially dangerous locations seemed worse. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Emma froze, exchanging alarmed glances with Jason, whose face had gone pale. "Is it my dad?" he whispered. "I don't think so," Emma said, though she wasn't sure. "Stay here." She approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. Relief washed over her at the sight of her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher in her 70s who lived across the hall. "Buenos dias, Emma," Mrs. Rodriguez said when Emma opened the door. "I heard children's voices. Is everything all right?" Emma hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "My friend's children are staying with me for a bit while he sorts some things out." Mrs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, her dark eyes sharp despite her age. "I see. And would these children happen to be the ones you were discussing on the phone last night?" "My walls are thin, Carita," Emma blushed. It's complicated." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled kindly. "Life usually is. May I meet them?" After a moment's consideration, Emma stepped back to allow her neighbor inside. Jason immediately moved in front of Mikey, his protective instincts engaged. "Boys, this is my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez." Emma introduced them. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Jason and Mikey." "Hello," Mrs. Rodriguez said warmly, making no attempt to approach the wary children. "I was just about to make pancakes at my apartment. I always make too many for just myself. Would you like some?" Mikey's eyes lit up, but he looked to Jason for permission. After a tense moment, Jason nodded slightly. "We like pancakes," he admitted. "Excellent," Mrs. Rodriguez declared. "Emma, why don't you get dressed while I take the boys to my apartment? Then you can join us, and we can discuss whatever needs discussing." Emma recognized the offer for what it was, a chance to speak privately about the situation. She nodded gratefully. "Is that okay with you boys?" she asked. Mikey was already nodding enthusiastically, but Jason remained hesitant. "Mrs. Rodriguez was a teacher for 40 years, Emma added. "She has grandchildren about your age." "Had," Mrs. Rodriguez corrected softly. "My daughter moved to Arizona with them last year. My apartment is too quiet now." Something in her expression must have resonated with Jason because he finally agreed. "Okay, but Emma's coming too, right?" "Right after I get dressed," she promised. 20 minutes later, Emma sat at Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen table, watching in amazement as Mikey devoured his third pancake. Jason ate more carefully, still maintaining his vigilance even as he enjoyed the food. Mrs. Rodriguez bustled around the kitchen, the picture of a doting grandmother, but when she caught Emma's eye, her expression was serious. "So," she said quietly as she refilled Emma's coffee cup, "what exactly is your plan here, Carita?" Emma sighed, keeping her voice low. "I'm going to try to find their father today. He's been absent for 3 days, and if you find him, I don't know," Emma admitted. "Try to convince him to get help, I guess. For the boy's sake. And if you don't find him?" Emma stared into her coffee cup, avoiding the older woman's penetrating gaze. "Then I'll have to call social services, but they'll probably be separated." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sadly. "It's a difficult situation, but you cannot simply keep them, Emma. You understand this. Yes, I know, Emma whispered. But I can't just throw them into the system without at least trying to find their father first. Mrs. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. I will watch the children today while you search. They will be safe with me. Really? But no buts, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted. I have nothing but time these days, and it has been too long since I had young ones in my home. Just bring them back before bedtime. Relief flooded through Emma. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. Find their father, Mrs. Rodriguez said simply. That is payment enough. With the childcare situation resolved, Emma prepared to leave. She knelt before the boys, who were now watching cartoons on Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient television. I'm going to look for your dad today, she told them. You'll stay here with Mrs. Rodriguez until I get back. What if you can't find him? Jason asked, the worry evident in his young face. Emma chose her words carefully. Then we'll figure out next steps together. But I promise I'll come back either way, okay? Jason nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. Mikey, however, seemed perfectly content with the arrangement, especially after Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned she had cookie dough in the refrigerator they could bake later. Emma left the apartment with a list of locations to check. Bars, a friend's apartment, places Jason remembered his father mentioning. As she headed down the stairs, her phone rang. Sarah. Please tell me you called CPS this morning, her sister said without preamble. Not yet, Emma replied, stepping out into the morning sunlight. I'm going to try to find their father first. Sarah's sigh was heavy with disapproval. I know. You think you're helping, but this isn't your responsibility. These kids need professional intervention. Like we got? Emma couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Being shuttled between 6 different homes in 2 years was professional. Intervention? It wasn't ideal, Sarah conceded. But at least we were safe. And eventually we got placed with the Hendersons, who were good to us. After being separated for nearly a year, Emma reminded her. Do you remember what that was like? Not knowing if you were okay? If I'd ever see you again? A long pause followed. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was gentler. I remember. But Emma, you can't save everyone. And you're putting yourself at risk here. What if this guy is dangerous? What if he accuses you of kidnapping his kids? Emma had considered these possibilities and had no good answers. I have to try, Sarah. For one day at least. If I can't find him or if he's not receptive, I'll call CPS tomorrow. I promise. Another sigh. You always were the stubborn one. Just be careful, okay? And call me if you need anything. I will, Emma promised, grateful for her sister's grudging support. Love you. Love you too, idiot, Sarah replied with reluctant affection. Emma ended the call and stared at the list of places in her hand. Finding one man in a city this size would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But she had to try. For Jason and Mikey, she had to try. Emma's search proved fruitless. She visited 4 bars where the boy's father, Mark Wilson, was known to drink. She showed his photo, taken from a family picture in the boy's apartment, to bartenders and regulars, but no one had seen him in several days. At the apartment of his friend Dave, she learned Mark had crashed there 2 nights ago, but had left in a hurry the following morning, saying something about making things right. By late afternoon, Emma was exhausted, worried, and no closer to finding the boy's father than when she'd started. As the sun began to set, she reluctantly returned to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. The scene that greeted her was unexpectedly domestic. Mikey and Jason sat at the kitchen table, flour dusting their clothes and faces as they decorated misshapen cookies. Mrs. Rodriguez supervised, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, her weathered hands guiding Mikey's as he struggled with a tube of icing. Emma! Mikey cried when he spotted her, jumping up from his chair. We made cookies, and Mrs. R showed us how to make paper airplanes, and she has a real turtle named Fernando. Tortoise, Mrs. Rodriguez corrected gently. Fernando is a tortoise, not a turtle. Jason's eyes met Emma's, the question in them clear. Did you find him? Emma shook her head slightly. The boy's shoulders slumped, but he quickly composed himself for his brother's sake. Look at our cookies, he said, gesturing to the table. We made some for you too. Emma admired their creations with appropriate enthusiasm, exchanging concerned glances with Mrs. Rodriguez over the children's heads. After the boys had packed up their cookies and said goodbye to Mrs. Rodriguez and Fernando, Emma led them back to her apartment. What happens now? Jason asked as soon as the door closed behind them. Emma took a deep breath. I couldn't find your dad today. I'm going to try again tomorrow, but she hesitated. uncertain how to explain their limited options. "Are you going to call the people who take kids away?" Jason's voice was small but steady. "Not yet," Emma said. "Not until we've tried everything else first." Relief washed over Jason's face. Mikey, oblivious to the underlying tension, had already settled on the couch with his stuffed cat, chattering about the adventures Mr. Whiskers had with Fernando the tortoise. That night, after the boys were asleep, Emma sat at her tiny kitchen table making lists. She'd need to call in sick again tomorrow. She'd need more food, proper meals, not just cereal and peanut butter sandwiches. The boys needed clean clothes, and Mikey had mentioned he took medicine for his asthma, but the prescription was almost empty. Emma stared at her bank account balance. On her phone, $342.17. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her next paycheck wouldn't arrive for another 10 days. Even basic necessities for the boys would stretch her budget to the breaking point. Still, she found herself making another list. Things to make the boys comfortable. Toothbrushes, pajamas, maybe a few books or small toys. They clearly had so little. The next morning, Emma woke early to find Jason already up, attempting to fold the blankets she'd given him. "You don't have to do that," she said, watching him struggle with the unwieldy fabric. "I want to help," he replied seriously, "so you don't get tired of us being here." The statement hit Emma like a physical blow. How many times had this 8-year-old boy tried to make himself useful to avoid being a burden? How many adults had failed him already? "Jason," she said, kneeling to his level, "you and Mikey aren't a burden. You don't have to earn your place. Here," he looked at her skeptically. "Dad says nothing's free. You have to work for what you get." "Well, you're a kid," Emma said firmly. "Your job is to learn and play and grow, not to take care of adults." Jason seemed unconvinced, but nodded anyway. They settled into an uneasy routine over the next 2 days. Mrs. Rodriguez watched the boys while Emma worked short shifts at the grocery store and continued her increasingly desperate search for Mark Wilson. In the evenings, they had dinner together, sometimes joined by Mrs. Rodriguez, whose decades of teaching experience proved invaluable in keeping the boys engaged and distracted. Emma found herself looking forward to these makeshift family dinners, to Mikey's enthusiastic stories and even Jason's cautious smiles that became more frequent each day. She took them to a nearby park, watched them play tag and collect leaves, and felt a warmth in her chest that both comforted and terrified her. "You're getting attached," Mrs. Rodriguez observed on the third evening, as they washed dishes side by side while the boys built a fort from couch cushions. "I know," Emma admitted quietly. "It's stupid. It's human," the older woman corrected, "but also complicated. Have you considered what happens if their father doesn't return?" Emma had thought of little else. "I have to call social services soon. I know that. But every time I pick up the phone, you remember your own experience," Mrs. Rodriguez finished. For her, Emma nodded, tears threatening. They've already lost so much. Their mother, their stability, and now they might lose each other too. Mrs. Rodriguez dried her hands and placed one on Emma's shoulder. "Not all foster situations are bad, Carita. Some families specifically request siblings, and there are options besides foster care. Kinship care, for instance. Do the boys have any relatives?" "Not that they know of," Emma said. "Their mother was an only child, and their father," she shrugged helplessly. "Perhaps this is something to investigate," Mrs. Rodriguez suggested, before making that call. Emma nodded, grateful for the practical advice and the temporary reprieve it offered. That night, she gently questioned the boys about extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone who might take them in if their father didn't return. "Mom's parents died before I was born," Jason said, frowning in concentration, "and Dad doesn't talk about his family. I think they had a fight or something. Do you know their names? Your grandparents on your dad's side?" Jason shook his head, but Mikey piped up unexpectedly. "Grandma Jean sends birthday cards." "She does?" Jason looked surprised. Mikey nodded enthusiastically. "With money inside. Dad always takes the money but lets me keep the cards. They have puppies on them." This was the first solid lead Emma had found. "Do you still have any of these cards, Mikey?" "In my special box at home," Mikey confirmed, "with Mom's necklace and my baby tooth." Emma made a mental note to check the boys' apartment again for this special box, and any contact information it might contain. A grandmother who sent birthday cards might be a lifeline. Someone who could provide the boys with family stability without the uncertainty of foster care. As Emma tucked the boys into bed that night, her bed, which was starting to feel more like theirs, She felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Tomorrow she would find Mikey's special box, locate Grandma Jean, and perhaps find a solution that kept the boys together with family who loved them. What she didn't expect was the harsh knock on her door at 7:13 the next morning, or the sound of a man's slurred voice calling out for his sons. "Jason! Mikey! I know you're in there!" The voice was loud enough to wake the entire building. Emma froze, her coffee mug halfway to her lips. The boys, still asleep in her bedroom, wouldn't have heard yet, but it was only a matter of time before the shouting woke them. Another loud knock. "Open the damn door! Someone said they saw my kids here!" Emma set her mug down with shaking hands and approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, she could see a man in his mid-30s with dark hair that matched the boys'. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his stance unsteady, drunk or hungover or both. Mark Wilson had finally appeared. Emma took a deep breath and opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged so it opened only a few inches. "Mr. Wilson?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The man stopped mid-knock, his fists still raised. "Who the hell are you? Where are my kids?" "My name is Emma Reyes. I'm a cashier at PriceMart," she explained, trying to project calm she didn't feel. "Your sons are here. They're safe." "Safe?" Mark's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "You took my kids? What gives you the right?" "They were alone," Emma interrupted, her own anger rising to meet his. "For 3 days. No food, no supervision, nothing." Jason was trying to buy a single candy bar to share with his 5-year-old brother. Mark's aggressive posture faltered slightly. I had things to take care of. Business. They know the drill." "The drill is child neglect," Emma said, more sharply than she intended. "Jason left a note asking for help. That's how I found them." Mark's face cycled through several emotions. Anger, confusion, shame, and finally a hardening resolve. "Unlock this door right now, or I'm calling the cops. Kidnapping is a federal offense, lady." Before Emma could respond, a small voice came from behind her. "Dad?" She turned to see Jason standing in the hallway, Mikey sleepily rubbing his eyes beside him. The hope and fear warring on Jason's face broke Emma's heart. "Jason, Mikey," Mark's voice immediately softened. "Come on, boys. We're going home." Emma hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Mark pushed past her, dropping to one knee as Mikey ran to him with an excited cry of, "Daddy!" Jason hung back, his expression guarded. "Where were you?" the older boy asked quietly. Mark's smile faltered. "I had some business to take care of, buddy. But I'm back now. Everything's gonna be fine." Emma could smell the alcohol on him from across the room. "Mr. Wilson, can we talk privately for a moment?" Mark stood, gathering Mikey in his arms. "Nothing to talk about. These are my kids. We're leaving." "Dad?" Jason said, his young voice surprisingly firm. "You promised after last time. You promised you wouldn't disappear again." Mark's face flushed. "I know, buddy. I messed up, but I'm here now. And we're going home." "Mr. Wilson," Emma tried again. "I'm not trying to keep you from your children, but I'm concerned about their welfare. They were alone for days without proper food or supervision. So you just took them?" Mark's anger returned. "Instead of, I don't know, calling the police or social services like a normal person?" The irony of his suggestion wasn't lost on Emma. "I was trying to find you first. I went to the bars you frequent. I spoke to your friend Dave. No one knew where you were." At the mention of Dave, Mark's expression shifted subtly. "Yeah, well, I had some personal matters to deal with. But I'm back now, and we're going home. Boys, get your things." Mikey immediately wiggled down from his father's arms and ran to collect Mr. Whiskers. Jason didn't move. "Are you drunk right now?" the boy asked bluntly. Mark's face hardened. "Watch your tone, Jason. I'm your father. You smell like the special medicine." Jason persisted. "You promised you wouldn't take it anymore." Emma's heart ached for the child forced to confront his parents' addiction. She stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Jason's shoulder. "Why don't you help Mikey gather your things? I need to speak with your dad for a minute." Jason hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the bedroom where Mikey was stuffing his belongings into his small backpack. Emma turned to Mark, keeping her voice low. "Listen, I don't want to call social services, but I will if I have to. Those boys deserve better than being abandoned whenever you decide to go on a bender." Mark's aggressive posture deflated slightly. He ran a hand through his greasy hair. "You think I don't know that? You think I want to be this way?" "What I think," Emma said carefully, is that you're struggling, and your boys are paying the price. Mark stared at her for a long moment, then sank onto her couch, his head in his hands. Their mother died, he said, his voice cracking. Cancer. 2 years ago. She was everything to me, to us, and now I'm supposed to do this alone. And I just can't sometimes. Emma sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. I understand grief, but your sons are grieving too, and they need their father. You don't get it, Mark said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. I see her in them every day. Mikey has her smile. Jason has her eyes. It kills me, over and over again. So you drink, to forget, Emma said softly. Mark nodded miserably. It helps, for a little while. And then I hate myself even more. He wiped roughly at his eyes. I'm a terrible father. I know that. But they're all I have left of her. Emma took a risk. Have you considered getting help? There are programs for people in your situation. Single parents, people dealing with grief and addiction. We can't afford therapy, Mark scoffed. I can barely keep the lights on. There are free programs, Emma insisted. Support groups, community, resources, and, she hesitated, then pressed on. What about your mother? Jean, right? Mikey mentioned she sends birthday cards. Mark's expression darkened. We don't talk. She didn't approve of Caroline, my wife. Said she was taking me away from the family business. He gave a bitter laugh. Turns out Caroline was the only thing holding me to any kind of decent life. At all. Maybe it's time to rebuild that bridge, Emma suggested. For the boys' sake, if not your own. They need family, all the family they can get. Before Mark could respond, the boys emerged from the bedroom, backpacks on, Jason clutching a small stack of cookies wrapped in napkins. These are for you, he said, offering them to Emma. For helping us. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Thank you, Jason. That's very thoughtful. Can we come visit Mrs. Rodriguez before we go? Mikey asked, looking up at his father. She has a turtle. Named Fernando. Tortoise. Jason corrected automatically. Mark looked confused, and Emma explained about their elderly neighbor who had helped care for the boys. After a moment's consideration, Mark nodded. Sure, buddy. We can say goodbye to Mrs. Rodriguez and her tortoise. As they prepared to leave, Emma pulled Mark aside one final time. Here's my number, she said, pressing a piece of paper into his hand. If you need help, any kind of help, call me before you disappear again. The boys have been through enough. Mark stared at the paper, then slowly folded it and tucked it into his pocket. Why do you care so much? They're not your kids. Emma thought of her own childhood, of the adults who had looked the other way, of the system that had separated her from her sister. Because someone should, she said simply. Mark held her gaze for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his bloodshot eyes. Then he nodded once and turned to his sons. Come on, boys. Let's go thank Mrs. Rodriguez, and then we're going home. Emma watched as they filed out of her apartment, Mikey chattering excitedly about Fernando the tortoise, Jason looking back one last time with an expression that broke her heart, gratitude mixed with resignation, as if he knew this brief period of stability was ending. As the door closed behind them, Emma was left alone in her suddenly quiet apartment, surrounded by evidence of the children who had briefly filled it with life. A forgotten sock under the coffee table, crayon drawings on her refrigerator, the lingering scent of the cookies they'd baked together. She sank onto the couch, exhausted and hollowed out. She had found their father as she'd promised, but instead of the relief she'd expected to feel, there was only a gnawing worry and an unexpected sense of loss. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Any update on those kids? Emma stared at the message, unsure how to condense the events of the morning into a text. Finally, she typed, their dad came back. They went home with him. Sarah's response was immediate. That's good, right? Problem solved? Emma thought about Mark's bloodshot eyes, about Jason's resignation, about Mikey's innocent trust. She typed back, I don't think it's solved at all. Emma returned to work the next day, moving through her shift like a ghost. Her fingers punched register keys automatically, while her mind replayed her last glimpse of Jason's face. Those old eyes in a young face, resigned to whatever came next. You okay? Tom asked during her break. You seem off. Emma shrugged. Just tired. This have anything to do with you running out of here the other day? Or that kid's note? She'd almost forgotten that Tom had read Jason's plea for help. The situation's been handled, she said. the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Tom studied her face. Doesn't look handled to me. Looks like it's eating you alive. Emma sighed, too exhausted to maintain the pretense. Their father came back, but he's struggling, drinking, grief, the whole mess. You call social services? No, Emma admitted. He's their father. He showed up. What was I supposed to do? Tom leaned against the break room wall. What does your gut tell you? That those boys aren't safe? Emma whispered, saying aloud what she'd been avoiding since watching them leave, that it's only a matter of time before he disappears again. That next time could be worse. Tom nodded slowly. So what are you going to do about it? It was the question Emma had been asking herself. Since dawn. I don't know, she answered honestly. I gave him my number, told him to call if he needs help, and if he doesn't call, if those kids end up alone again, or worse. Emma had no answer. After her shift, instead of going home to her empty apartment, Emma found herself driving to the boys' neighborhood. She told herself she was just checking in, making sure they were okay, but as she parked across from their building, she recognized the impulse for what it was. She couldn't let go. She sat in her car for nearly an hour, watching the building's entrance, feeling simultaneously like a concerned guardian and a stalker. Just as she was about to leave, she spotted them. Mark walking with the boys, Mikey riding on his shoulders, Jason trailing slightly behind. They carried plastic bags from a nearby convenience store. Relief washed over Emma. They were okay. Mark was sober enough to shop for groceries. She could go home now, could stop worrying, but as she watched, an older woman approached the family. Even from a distance, Emma could see Mark's body language change, stiffening, defensive. The woman gestured emphatically, pointing at the boys. Mark shook his head repeatedly. Jason stepped closer to Mikey, who had been set down during the confrontation. Before Emma fully registered her own actions, she was out of her car and crossing the street. Mandatory reporting laws, the woman was saying as Emma approached. I've given you plenty of chances, Mark. Mrs. Peterson, Emma said, recognition dawning. This was the neighbor Jason had mentioned, the one who used to check on them before moving away. All three adults turned to stare at her. Do I know you? The older woman asked. I'm Emma Reyes. She hesitated, unsure how to explain her presence. She's a friend, Mark supplied, surprising her. She's been helping with the boys. Mrs. Peterson looked skeptical. Well, friend, or not, she should know that I've already called social services. They'll be conducting a welfare check tomorrow. Mark's face drained of color. You had no right. I had every right, Mrs. Peterson interrupted firmly. I was visiting my old neighbor, Mrs. Guzman, and she told me the boys were alone for 3 days last week. 3 days, Mark, after you promised. It wouldn't happen again. I made a mistake, Mark said through clenched teeth. It won't happen again. That's what you said last time, Mrs. Peterson replied, and the time before that. Emma watched Jason's face during this exchange. The boy showed no surprise, only a weary acceptance that made her heart ache. What happens now? Emma asked Mrs. Peterson. A caseworker will visit tomorrow, the older woman explained. They'll assess the situation, determine if the children are safe, and if they determine they're not, Emma pressed, though she already knew the answer, then the children will be taken into protective custody while Mark gets his act together, Mrs. Peterson said bluntly. If he ever does. Mark's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You sanctimonious bit, Dad, Jason interrupted quietly. Mikey's getting upset. Indeed. The younger boy had begun to cry silently, fat tears rolling down his round cheeks. Mark immediately crouched beside his son, his anger temporarily forgotten. It's okay, buddy, he soothed. Everything's going to be fine. But over Mikey's head, Mark's eyes met Emma's, and she saw raw panic there. He knew as well as she did that things were far from fine. Mrs. Peterson, Emma said, making a split-second decision. What if Mark voluntarily entered a treatment program? Would that make a difference to social services? The older woman considered this. It might, if he demonstrated genuine commitment to recovery and arranged appropriate childcare during treatment. I can't afford rehab, Mark muttered. There are state-funded programs, Emma countered, and support groups that cost nothing. And the boys? Mark demanded. Who watches them while I'm getting my head shrunk? Emma hesitated only briefly. I could help. And Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor. Between us, we could make sure they're supervised until you're better. Mark stared at her in disbelief. Why would you do that? You barely know us. Because I was them, Emma wanted to say. because the system nearly destroyed me and my sister. Because your sons deserve better than what's coming for them. Instead, she simply said, because they need help. And so do you. Mrs. Peterson looked between them thoughtfully. A voluntary treatment plan with established temporary guardianship might satisfy social services, for now, but Mark would need to show real commitment. I'll do anything, Mark said, desperation edging his voice. I can't lose my boys. Then prove it, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. Go to social services yourself before they come to you. Tell them you recognize you need help and have a support system in place. It won't guarantee anything, but it shows initiative. The next morning found Emma, Mark, and the boys sitting in the waiting room of the county social services office. Mark looked haggard but sober, his hands fidgeting nervously in his lap. The boys sat quietly, sensing the gravity of the situation despite their young ages. Wilson family? A tired-looking woman called from a doorway. Mark stood, squaring his shoulders like a man facing a firing squad. That's us. The caseworker, Ms. Jennings, had the weary efficiency of someone who had seen too much in too little time. She listened as Mark explained his situation. His wife's death, his struggle with alcohol, his recent absence, and his commitment to entering treatment. And these are your friends? Ms. Jennings asked, eyeing Emma skeptically. Emma's been helping with the boys, Mark explained. She's offered to continue while I get help. Ms. Jennings turned to Emma. You understand what you're volunteering for? This isn't babysitting. This is potentially weeks or months of shared childcare responsibilities. I understand, Emma said firmly. And you are? A concerned citizen, Emma replied. I work at Price Mart as a cashier. I have a small apartment but a flexible schedule. And my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, is a retired teacher who has already been helping with the boys. Ms. Jennings made notes, her expression unreadable. Mr. Wilson, I'll need you to complete a substance abuse assessment today. Depending on those results, we'll determine an appropriate treatment plan. In the meantime, I'll need to conduct home visits, both at your residence and at Ms. Reyes's, to ensure appropriate living conditions. Whatever you need, Mark agreed quickly. This is unusual, Ms. Jennings warned. Typically, children would be placed in emergency foster care during parental treatment. Please, Mark said, his voice breaking slightly. They've already lost their mother. I don't want them to lose each other too. Something in Ms. Jennings's professional demeanor softened, marginally. I'll need signed temporary guardianship forms from you, Mr. Wilson, authorizing Ms. Reyes to make necessary decisions regarding the children in your absence, and regular check-ins, home visits, and progress reports. The process took hours. Forms to fill out, assessments to complete, arrangements to make. By late afternoon, a tentative plan had emerged. Mark would enter a 30-day inpatient treatment program, followed by outpatient therapy and AA meetings. The boys would split time between their apartment, with Emma staying there, and Emma's place, with Mrs. Rodriguez providing additional support. This is highly unusual, Ms. Jennings repeated as they prepared to leave. If there are any issues, any at all, the children will be placed in state custody immediately. Is that understood? All the adults nodded solemnly. Outside the building, Mark turned to Emma, his expression a complex mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Why are you doing this? Really? What's in it for you? Emma thought about telling him then, about her own childhood, about the foster homes, about being separated from Sarah. But looking at his fragile sobriety, his precarious grip on hope, she decided against adding her burdens to his. Let's just say I know what it's like to fall through the cracks, she said instead, and I don't want that for Jason and Mikey. Mark studied her face, then nodded once. Thank you, he said gruffly, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. Don't thank me, Emma replied. Just get better. For them. As they walked to their cars, Jason fell into step beside Emma, his small hand slipping into hers. Are we going to be okay? He asked quietly, his voice too serious for an 8-year-old. Emma squeezed his hand gently. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you are. It wasn't a promise she was certain she could keep, but in that moment, with Jason's hand warm in hers, and the future uncertain but not hopeless, it was the only answer she could give. Emma's first day back at work after everything was arranged was a disaster. She was exhausted from spending the night at the Wilsons' apartment, where Mikey had woken twice with nightmares. She'd missed her bus and arrived 10 minutes late, her uniform wrinkled from being hastily stuffed into her bag. And she'd forgotten her lunch, meaning she'd have to spend precious dollars on food from the store's deli. "Emma," Tom called as she rushed toward her register. "In my office, please." Her heart sank. This was it. She was going to be fired. Walking out mid-shift, calling in sick twice in 1 week after 3 years of perfect attendance, arriving late today, she couldn't even argue she didn't deserve it. But the timing couldn't be worse. She needed this job now more than ever, with 2 extra mouths to help feed. Tom's office was barely larger than a closet, tucked behind the customer service desk. He gestured for her to sit in the folding chair across from his cluttered desk. "I think it's time we talked about what's going on," he said, his expression unreadable. "You've been with us for 3 years. Perfect attendance, always on time, willing to cover shifts. Then suddenly you're running out mid-shift, calling in sick. Showing up late, I know," Emma said, staring at her hands. "I'm sorry. There were extenuating circumstances. The kids from the note?" Emma nodded miserably. Tom leaned back in his chair. "Tell me everything." To her surprise, Emma found herself pouring out the whole story, finding Jason at her register, the note, the boys alone. In that dismal apartment, Mark's return and subsequent agreement to enter rehab, the arrangement with social services. Tom listened without interrupting, his face growing increasingly thoughtful. "So now you're essentially a single parent to 2 kids while working full-time at minimum wage," he summarized when she finished. "Temporarily," Emma clarified. "Just until their dad completes the program. And Mrs. Rodriguez helps a lot." Tom drummed his fingers on his desk. "You realize this is grounds for termination? Walking out mid-shift alone?" "I know," Emma whispered, her throat tight. "But I couldn't just leave them there." "No," Tom agreed unexpectedly. "You couldn't." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Emma uncomfortable. Finally, he sighed and opened his desk drawer, pulling out a photograph in a simple frame. He passed it to Emma. The photo showed a younger Tom, maybe 15 or 16, standing beside an elderly couple. The woman had her arm around his shoulders, but Tom's posture was stiff, his smile forced. "My last foster home," Tom explained. "The Berkmans. Good people, actually, though you couldn't tell it from my attitude in that picture. I'd been through 6 placements by then. Didn't trust anyone." Emma stared at him in shock. "You were in foster care?" Tom nodded. "From age 9 to 18. My mom was an addict. Dad was never in the picture. Sound familiar?" I had no idea," Emma stammered. "Not something I advertise," Tom said, taking the photo back. "My point is, I know exactly why you did what you did. Those boys were headed straight for the system, and while it works out okay for some kids, for others," he shrugged eloquently. "Are you firing me?" Emma asked, unable to bear the suspense any longer. Tom actually laughed. "No, Emma. I'm not firing you. In fact, I'm going to do you one better." He pulled out a form from another drawer. "How would you feel about becoming an assistant manager?" Emma blinked in confusion. "What?" "We have an opening. Marissa gave notice. Last week, her wife got transferred to Portland. I was going to post the position today, but I think you'd be perfect for it. But I just told you, I have all these new responsibilities." "Exactly," Tom interrupted. "Which is why you need a more flexible schedule and better pay. Assistant managers make $4 more per hour than cashiers, and you can set your own schedule within reason." Emma's mind reeled. The raise alone would make an enormous difference in her ability to care for the boys while maintaining her own bills. "Why would you do this?" she asked, still stunned. Tom's expression softened. "Because 17 years ago, I was Jason, and no one stepped up for me the way you did for him. The least I can do is make it a little easier for you to keep those boys together." Tears sprang to Emma's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Tom suggested with a small smile. "And then go call Ms. Jennings and tell her about your promotion. It can only help your case with social services." Emma nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. "Yes, thank you. There's something else," Tom added, reaching into his desk one more time. He pulled out a brochure and handed it to her. "The company has an employee assistance program. Free counseling, financial advice, legal consultations. And this," he pointed to a section of the brochure, "discounts on prescriptions, including for dependents under your care." Emma stared at the brochure, thinking of Mikey's nearly empty asthma medication. This would cover the boys? As long As you have temporary guardianship paperwork, yes. And there's an emergency fund for employees facing hardship. Given the circumstances, I think you'd qualify. It was too much. After days of stress and uncertainty, of stretching her meager resources, and lying awake worrying about money, this sudden lifeline left Emma speechless. I don't know how to thank you, she managed finally. Tom waved away her gratitude. Thank me by giving those kids the stability I never had, and by being on time tomorrow, he added with a wink. Emma laughed through her tears. I will, I promise. As she left Tom's office, her mind was already calculating how the raise would affect her budget, what new groceries she could afford, whether she might even be able to buy the boys new clothes instead of relying on the secondhand store. For the first time since finding Jason's note, Emma felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Boys fed and playing with Fernando. Take your time. Emma smiled, typing back a quick thank you, along with the news of her promotion. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, she noticed the impatient woman from that fateful day, the one who had been in line when she first spotted Jason, approaching her register. Aren't you going to open your lane? The woman asked, irritably. I'm in a hurry. Emma took a deep breath and summoned her customer service smile. Of course, ma'am. Right away. But as she logged into her register, Emma found herself wondering what this woman would think if she knew that her impatience that day had inadvertently set in motion events that changed multiple lives. That if she hadn't huffed away to another register, Emma might never have noticed the small boy in the worn sneakers, who now slept in her apartment and called her Miss Emma, with growing trust in his voice. The thought gave her a secret sense of satisfaction as she scanned the woman's organic produce and premium coffee, smiling pleasantly through the entire transaction. The first letter from Mark arrived 10 days after he entered rehab. The envelope bore the facility's logo in the corner and was addressed in surprisingly neat handwriting to Jason and Mikey Wilson, C.O. Emma Reyes. Emma gave it to the boys at dinner that evening, watching their reactions carefully. Jason examined the envelope with suspicion before carefully opening it, while Mikey bounced in his seat with excitement. Is it from Dad? Read it, Jason. The letter was brief. An explanation of the program, an apology for his absence, and a promise to get better for real this time. Jason read it aloud for Mikey's benefit, his expression neutral, but Emma noticed how carefully he folded it afterward, tucking it into his pocket rather than leaving it on the table. Can we write back? Mikey asked. Of course, Emma assured him. We can do that after dinner. Later, she helped Mikey draw pictures for his father, while Jason wrote a careful letter updating Mark on their activities. The older boy's caution broke Emma's heart. He wrote nothing of his fears or hopes, just factual statements about school enrollment and daily routines, as if afraid to reveal too much of himself even to his father. Establishing a routine had been challenging but essential. Emma's promotion at work meant better pay and more flexibility, allowing her to be home when the boys returned from their new school. Mrs. Rodriguez continued to help, watching them during Emma's occasional evening shifts and teaching Mikey to care for Fernando the tortoise. The weekly therapy sessions required by social services were harder. Jason initially refused to speak to the kind-faced woman assigned to them, while Mikey talked non-stop, but avoided any mention of his mother's death or father's absence. The therapist assured Emma this was normal, that trust would come with time. But Emma worried nonetheless. They need stability above all else, Ms. Chen, the therapist explained during a private consultation. Consistent routines, consistent caregivers, consistent expectations. Emma nodded, thinking of her own childhood, the constant disruption of new homes, new rules, new faces. I'm trying. You're doing remarkably well, Ms. Chen assured her, especially given the unusual circumstances. The unusual circumstances became more complicated when Emma received an unexpected call from her ex-husband, David. I heard you have kids living with you now, he said without preamble. From Jessica Moore at your building. Emma sighed. Jessica was the building gossip, always watching from behind her curtains. Temporarily, yes, I'm helping a friend. Helping a friend, David repeated skeptically. By raising his children? While he's in rehab? Emma's grip tightened on her phone. What do you want, David? I want to know how this affects our custody arrangement for Lily. I'm not comfortable with our daughter staying in an apartment with strange children and their addict father. Their father isn't here, Emma pointed out, anger rising. And they're not strange children, They're Jason and Mikey. They're 8 and 5, and they're sweet, well-behaved boys who've been through hell. Like you were going to tell me about this situation if I hadn't heard it from Jessica, David countered. We have a custody agreement, Emma. I have a right to know who's around my daughter. Emma closed her eyes, fighting for calm. Her weekend. Visitations with her daughter were precious. Hard-won after the bitter divorce 3 years ago. The thought of losing them made her physically ill. The situation is temporary, she said finally, and supervised by social services. There's nothing inappropriate or dangerous about it. I want to meet them, David said firmly. Before I decide whether to petition for a modification of our custody agreement. The threat hung in the air. Emma knew David well enough to know he would follow through if he felt justified. Fine, she agreed reluctantly. Next weekend when you drop Lily off. After hanging up, Emma sank onto her couch, head in her hands. She'd been so focused on the boy's needs, on Mark's recovery, on satisfying social services, that she'd completely overlooked how this situation might affect her visitation rights with her own daughter. The thought of having to choose between helping Jason and Mikey and seeing her daughter was unbearable. Yet what alternatives did she have? The boys were beginning to trust her, to feel secure in their temporary arrangement. Disrupting that now could set back their progress significantly. Emma was still contemplating this dilemma when Jason emerged from the bathroom in his pajamas, hair damp from his shower. Is everything okay? He asked, his perceptive eyes taking in her distress. Emma forced a smile. Just grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Jason studied her face, clearly unconvinced. Is it about us? Are we causing problems? No, Emma said quickly. Too quickly. Jason's expression shuddered, and she knew she'd made a mistake. It's not like that, she amended. It's just complicated. We can go back to our apartment, Jason offered, his young voice steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes. Mikey and I used to be alone there all the time. We'd be okay. The offer, so adult and so heartbreaking from an 8-year-old, made Emma's decision clear. She patted the couch beside her, and after a moment's hesitation, Jason sat down. That's not going to happen, she said firmly. You and Mikey are staying right here with me, or at your apartment with me staying there, just like we arranged. This is just a small bump in the road and we'll figure it out together. Jason didn't look convinced. Is it about your daughter? The one in the pictures? Emma nodded, surprised he'd made the connection. Her name is Lily. She's 6, just a little older than Mikey. She stays with me some weekends, and her father, my ex-husband, is concerned about the new arrangement. Because of us, Jason concluded. Because he doesn't know you yet, Emma corrected gently. Once he meets you and Mikey, he'll understand there's nothing to worry about. Jason considered this. What if he doesn't? It was the question Emma had been asking herself. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I promise you, Jason, I'm not going to abandon you and Mikey. We made a deal, remember? Some of the tension left the boys' thin shoulders. Okay. The following weekend brought a new challenge. Emma had transformed her small apartment as best she could to accommodate Lily's visit alongside the boys. She'd purchased an inflatable mattress for herself, giving Lily and Mikey the bed while Jason slept on the couch. She'd stocked the refrigerator with everyone's favorite foods, and even bought a few board games they could all play together. David arrived with Lily precisely at noon, his expression tight with disapproval as he took in the cramped quarters. Daddy, look, Lily exclaimed, spotting the boys before Emma could make introductions. Are these my new brothers? The innocent question made all the adults freeze. Emma recovered first. No, sweetheart, this is Jason and Mikey. They're staying with me for a while because their dad is away on a trip. Oh, Lily said, momentarily, disappointed before brightening again. Do you want to see my doll? Her name is Princess Sparkle and she has 3 dresses. Mikey, always eager for new playmates, immediately agreed, while Jason hung back, watching David warily. This is cozy, David commented once the younger children had retreated to the bedroom to play. It's temporary, Emma reminded him. And it's working fine. David studied Jason, who stood protectively near the bedroom door where Mikey had disappeared. You must be Jason. I'm David, Lily's dad. Yes, sir, Jason replied politely, though his posture remained guarded. An awkward silence fell. Emma was about to suggest they all have lunch when Lily's voice rang out from the bedroom. Daddy, Mikey has a turtle and it lives next door. Tortoise, Jason corrected automatically, a small smile tugging at his lips for the first time since David's arrival. A tortoise? David raised an eyebrow at Emma. Fernando, she confirmed. He belongs to Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor who helps with the boys. She was a science teacher before she retired. Something in David's stance relaxed slightly. Lily loves animals. Maybe she could see this tortoise before I leave? And so they found themselves in Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, watching, as Lily and Mikey fed lettuce to Fernando under the elderly woman's supervision. Jason gradually lost his wariness as he explained tortoise facts to Lily, who listened with wide-eyed fascination. Emma stood beside David, observing the children's interactions. They're good kids, she said quietly. They've been through a lot. But they're resilient, David nodded slowly. They seem to be adjusting well. Thanks to consistent routines and stable caregivers, Emma quoted Ms. Chen deliberately. David gave her a knowing look. Throwing my own arguments back at me? Lily needs those things too, you know. And she has them, Emma countered. With both of us. That's not going to change because I'm temporarily helping 2 other children. David watched the kids for another moment, then sighed. I'm not going to petition for a custody modification, for now. But I expect to be kept informed about this situation, especially about when the father returns. Relief washed over Emma. Thank you. As David prepared to leave, Lily insisted on hugging everyone goodbye, including Jason, who endured the embrace, with awkward grace, and Mikey, who returned it enthusiastically. Can they be here next time I come? Lily asked her father, as he helped her into her coat. David met Emma's eyes over their daughter's head. We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. As Emma watched them leave, she felt Jason come to stand beside her. Is everything okay now? He asked quietly. Emma put her arm around his thin shoulders, surprised and touched when he didn't pull away. Yes, she said. I think it is. Later that night, after the boys were in bed, Emma received a text from David. Lily can't stop talking about her new friends. Maybe we can work this out after all. Emma smiled, feeling a knot of tension she'd carried for days finally begin to loosen. One small step forward. Sometimes that was enough. Miss Emma, can I put the star on top? Mikey asked, bouncing on his toes beside the small Christmas tree Emma had purchased for her apartment. I think that's a perfect job for you, Emma agreed, lifting him up so he could place the gold star on the highest branch. The tree was modest, just 4 feet tall and artificial, but the boys had decorated it with enthusiasm, hanging multicolored lights and ornaments they'd made in school. 3 months had passed since Emma found Jason's note. 3 months of adjustments, challenges, small victories, and gradual transformations. Mark was now in his 3rd week of outpatient treatment after completing the inpatient program, attending therapy 3 times a week and AA meetings on alternate days. He was living in a sober living facility, permitted supervised visits with the boys on weekends. These visits were still awkward, full of stilted conversations and uncertain interactions. Mark was trying, Emma could see that, but rebuilding trust with his sons would take time. Still, he had remained sober for 92 days, a fact he announced with quiet pride at the beginning of each visit. When is Dad coming for Christmas? Jason asked as he carefully arranged wrapped presents under the tree. His wariness around his father had softened somewhat, though he still maintained a protective vigilance where Mikey was concerned. He'll be here Christmas morning, Emma reminded him. Remember, we're all having breakfast together before I go to work. Emma had volunteered for the Christmas Eve shift at Price Mart, allowing other employees with children to have the evening off. Tom had promoted her to assistant manager as promised, and the extra income had made an enormous difference in their quality of life. She'd even been able to buy modest Christmas gifts for the boys and contribute to a small savings account for unexpected expenses. Can I bring Dad's present to our next session? Mikey asked, referring to their family therapy appointments, which had recently expanded to include Mark. Of course, Emma assured him, straightening the homemade card the younger boy had labored over for hours, decorating it with glitter and drawings of what appeared to be smiling potatoes, but were allegedly people. Do you think he'll like it? Mikey pressed anxiously. He'll love it, Emma said, ruffling his hair, because you made it especially for him. Jason remained quiet, fiddling with an ornament. He had made his father a gift too, a carefully constructed paper frame containing a photo of both boys, but he spoke of it less often than Mikey did of his creation. All right, troops, Emma announced, checking her watch. I need to get ready for work. You two remember the plan? We're coming with you, Jason recited dutifully. We'll sit in the break room and do our homework and not bother anyone. Then Mrs. Rodriguez will pick us up at 7 and take us home for dinner and bedtime. Perfect, Emma confirmed. The arrangement had become routine on days when her shift didn't align with school hours. Tom had been remarkably accommodating, allowing the boys to use the employee break room as long as they remained well-behaved, which they invariably did. The store was chaotic with last-minute Christmas shoppers when they arrived. Emma settled the boys in the break room with their backpacks full of activities and snacks before donning her name tag and heading to the floor. "Emma," Tom called, waving her over to customer service. "Slight change of plans. Can the boys help out today?" "Help out?" Emma repeated, confused. Tom gestured to the front of the store, where holiday music played, and a small area had been set up for bagging groceries and assisting customers to their cars. "We're short-staffed, and I thought Jason and Mikey might enjoy being official PriceSmart holiday helpers. With supervision, of course." Emma hesitated. "I don't know, Tom. They're pretty young. Jason's 8, right? My first job was bagging groceries at 9, Tom said with a shrug. Plus, I've got these." He pulled out 2 small green aprons with holiday helper embroidered on them in candy cane-striped name tags. Emma couldn't help smiling at the thought of how excited Mikey would be about the official uniform. "Let me ask them." As expected, Mikey was thrilled at the prospect. Jason was more cautious, but agreed when Emma assured him they would remain together and could stop if they became uncomfortable. Soon the boys were stationed at the end of Register 3, carefully placing groceries into bags under the supervision of Marla, the customer service manager. Mikey charmed every customer with his gap-toothed smile and enthusiastic holiday wishes, while Jason took his bagging duties with grave seriousness, carefully organizing items by weight and fragility. Emma watched them between helping customers, a warm pride blooming in her chest. 3 months ago, these children had been hungry, neglected, and afraid. Now they were thriving. Mikey's nightmares had decreased. Jason had made a friend at school, and both boys were gradually learning that adults could be reliable, that asking for help wasn't dangerous. "Your sons are delightful," an older woman commented as Emma rang up her groceries. "So polite." "Oh, they're not," Emma began automatically, then stopped herself. "Thank you. They're good boys." The afternoon passed in a blur of customers, Christmas music, and occasional glimpses of the boys at their station. Emma was helping a man find cranberry sauce when she heard a familiar voice at the register. Well, if it isn't the little men. From apartment 5C, Emma turned to see Mrs. Peterson, the former neighbor who had reported Mark to social services, smiling at Jason and Mikey as they bagged her groceries. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson," Jason said politely. "My goodness, look at you. Both working already." The older woman seemed genuinely pleased. "How is your father doing?" "He's in recovery," Mikey announced proudly, repeating the phrase he'd heard so often. 92 days sober." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Is that so? Well, that's wonderful news." Emma approached, curious about the interaction. "Mrs. Peterson, hello. I'm Emma Reyes. We met briefly a few months ago." Recognition dawned on the woman's face. "Yes, of course. You're the friend who's been helping with the boys. Mark's caseworker has mentioned you. All good things, I hope," Emma said with a nervous laugh. "Very good things," Mrs. Peterson assured her. In fact, she said this arrangement might serve as a model for other families in similar situations. Pride and relief mingled in Emma's chest. The arrangement had been precarious at first, with weekly visits from social services and constant evaluation. To hear it described as a potential model felt like validation of the hardest 3 months of her life. As Mrs. Peterson gathered her bags, she patted Mikey's head affectionately. "You tell your father I'm proud of him, young man. 92 days is no small accomplishment." The rest of the shift passed without incident until just before closing, when Emma noticed a commotion at the front of the store. A woman in an expensive coat was gesturing angrily at one of the registers, while several customers looked on. With a sinking feeling, Emma recognized her. The impatient customer from that fateful day, the one who had huffed away from Emma's register. Just as Jason had approached, the woman who had inadvertently changed all their lives. "Is there a problem here?" Emma asked, approaching with her assistant manager's badge clearly visible. The woman turned, recognition flickering briefly in her eyes. "Yes, there is. I specifically asked for paper bags, and this child put my groceries in plastic. Now my eggs are broken and my bread is squashed." She was pointing at Mikey, whose lower lip had begun to tremble at the harsh tone. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, Emma said smoothly, using her customer service voice. We'll replace the damaged items immediately. Mikey, would you like to help me find some new eggs for the lady? Mikey nodded eagerly, relief washing over his face at not being in trouble. The woman seemed taken aback by this approach. Well, I suppose that would be acceptable. As Emma and Mikey selected fresh eggs and bread, she noticed Jason watching the interaction carefully, ready to defend his brother if necessary. The realization that he trusted Emma to handle the situation fairly, to not blame Mikey unjustly, felt like another small victory. I'm sorry about your eggs, Mikey told the woman earnestly as they returned. I'm still learning how to bag properly. Something in the woman's stern expression softened. Well, we all have to start somewhere, I suppose. Thank you for the replacements. As the woman left, Emma knelt beside Mikey. You handled that very well. I'm proud of you. Mikey beamed, the incident already forgotten in the glow of praise. Can we be holiday helpers again tomorrow? The store is closed tomorrow, Emma reminded him. It's Christmas Eve, but maybe another day. By the time Mrs. Rodriguez arrived to take the boys home, they were exhausted but happy, proudly wearing their holiday helper aprons and chattering about their experiences. They were wonderful, Emma told her neighbor as she helped gather their belongings. Everyone loved them. Of course they did, Mrs. Rodriguez said matter-of-factly. They are wonderful children. As Emma watched them leave, Tom approached, a small envelope in his hand. Almost forgot. This came for you earlier. He handed her the envelope. Merry Christmas, Emma. You've done good work this year, and I don't just mean at the store. Puzzled, Emma opened the envelope after Tom walked away. Inside was a gift card to a local department store for $500, with a simple note, for the boys. From a grateful customer who wishes to remain anonymous. Emma stared at the card in disbelief, wondering who could have left such a generous gift. Mrs. Peterson, the woman with the broken eggs, having a change of heart? Some other customer who had observed their unusual family arrangement and been moved to help. Whoever it was, the gift meant new winter coats for the boys, perhaps new shoes to replace their worn ones, maybe even a few extra presents under the tree. It meant not having to choose between Christmas gifts and paying the electric bill. As Emma finished her shift and headed home through the gently falling snow, she found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. 3 months ago, she had been going through the motions of life, isolated and heartsore from the limited contact with her daughter, working a job that barely covered her expenses, connecting meaningfully with almost no one. Now her small apartment would be full of voices on Christmas morning. Mikey's excited chatter, Jason's thoughtful observations, Mark's tentative attempts to rebuild relationships, perhaps even Mrs. Rodriguez joining them for breakfast. Later, Lily would arrive for the afternoon, eager to share her new toys and play with her boys, as she had taken to calling Jason and Mikey. It wasn't the life Emma had imagined for herself. It was messy and complicated and exhausting. But as she walked through the quiet streets, Christmas lights twinkling in windows and the promise of tomorrow's gathering warming her heart, Emma realized it was also something else. It was family. Mark Wilson straightened his tie for the 5th time, his fingers trembling slightly. The borrowed suit hung loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight during rehab, but it was clean and pressed, the best he could manage for today's hearing. You look fine, Emma assured him, sensing his anxiety as they sat on the hard wooden bench outside the courtroom. Just remember what Ms. Jennings said. Be honest, speak clearly, and focus on the progress you've made. Mark nodded jerkily. 6 months had passed since he entered treatment. 6 months of sobriety, therapy, AA meetings, and supervised visits. With his sons, 6 months of rebuilding trust in painstaking increments. Now everything hinged on today's hearing, whether he would regain custody of Jason and Mikey. What if the judge doesn't think I've changed enough? Mark whispered, voicing the fear that had kept him awake for weeks. What if they decide the boys are better off without me? Emma had wondered the same thing, though for different reasons. The boys had stabilized over these months, establishing routines and relationships. Jason had finally begun to act like a child his age rather than a miniature adult burdened with too much responsibility. Mikey's nightmares had all but disappeared. Both were thriving in school, with friends and activities, and the normal concerns of childhood. Would returning to their father's full-time care disrupt this hard-won stability? The question had haunted Emma even as she helped Mark prepare for this day, reviewing his progress reports and rehearsing his testimony. Just tell the truth, she said now, sidestepping his question. You've done everything they asked of you. 183 days sober is a significant achievement. Mark managed a weak smile. 183 days. 4 hours and, he checked his watch, 17 minutes, but who's counting? Before Emma could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and Ms. Jennings emerged, her expression unreadable. "They're ready for us," she announced. "Remember, Mr. Wilson, this is an informal review hearing, not a trial. Judge Montgomery wants to assess your progress and determine next steps for Jason and Mikey's care." Mark stood, straightening his suit jacket one last time. And the boys? Waiting with their court-appointed advocate in Judge Montgomery's chambers. Ms. Jennings explained. "He'll speak with them privately before making his decision." Emma touched Mark's arm gently. "You've got this." He nodded, drawing a deep breath. "Thanks for everything. I wouldn't be here without you." As they entered the courtroom, Emma was struck by how small and ordinary it seemed for a place where such momentous decisions were made. No jury box, no gallery of spectators, just a judge's bench, a few tables for attorneys, and several chairs for participants. Judge Montgomery was a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a stern mouth, the combination giving him an air of compassionate authority. He nodded as they took their seats. "This is a 6-month review hearing in the matter of Jason and Michael Wilson," he began, consulting the file before him. "I've reviewed the reports from social services, Mr. Wilson's treatment providers, and the children's therapist. I've also spoken with the boys themselves." Emma felt Mark tense beside her at this last statement. "Mr. Wilson," the judge continued, "your progress appears significant. 6 months of sobriety, consistent participation in therapy, steady employment for the past 3 months, and positive reports from supervised visitations. Would you like to add anything to the record?" Mark cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I can't undo the mistakes I've made. I failed my sons after their mother died. I turned to alcohol instead of being the father they needed. But these past 6 months have shown me what's truly important. My boys are everything to me. I'm committed to my sobriety and to being the father they deserve." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Ms. Reyes, as the temporary guardian who has had daily contact with the children, what is your assessment of the situation?" Emma hadn't expected to be addressed directly. She straightened in her chair, choosing her words carefully. "The boys have made remarkable progress, Your Honor. They're doing well in school, forming healthy relationships, and processing their grief in age-appropriate ways. They love their father and look forward to their visits with him." "And do you believe Mr. Wilson is prepared to resume full parental responsibilities?" the judge pressed, the question Emma had been dreading. She glanced at Mark, saw the fear and hope battling in his eyes, and made her decision. "I believe Mark has worked incredibly hard to become the father his children need," she said honestly. "He's maintained his sobriety, found steady employment, and consistently prioritized his son's welfare. The boys need their father, and he's shown he's ready to be that for them." Relief washed over Mark's face, and he mouthed a silent, "Thank you," when the judge looked down at his notes. "Ms. Jennings, what is the recommendation from social services?" The social worker stood. "Your Honor, given Mr. Wilson's consistent progress and the positive adjustment of the children, we recommend a transitional return to Mr. Wilson's custody with continued monitoring for an additional 6 months." Judge Montgomery made a note, then looked up. "Mr. Wilson, I'm prepared to rule on this matter. But first I'd like to hear your plans should I return custody of your sons to you." Mark sat straighter. "I've secured a 2-bedroom apartment in the same school district the boys are currently attending. I'm working full-time at Carson's Construction with health benefits that will cover the boys' needs, including Mikey's asthma medication. I continue to attend AA meetings 3 times weekly and therapy twice a month. And," he hesitated, glancing at Emma, "I've arranged for the boys to stay with Ms. Reyes 2 afternoons a week after school and 1 weekend a month to maintain the stability they've established with her." This last part was news to Emma. They'd discussed continued contact, of course, but not specific arrangements. The thoughtfulness of Mark's plan, considering not just the boys' physical needs, but their emotional connections, touched her deeply. Judge Montgomery nodded approvingly. "That demonstrates foresight and consideration for your children's well-being. Based on all the evidence presented, I find that returning Jason and Michael to their father's custody, with the transitional plan outlined, serves their best interests." He made a notation in the file. "Mr. Wilson, custody of your sons will transition back to you over the next 30 days, with twice-weekly home visits from social services during that period. Monitoring will continue for 6 months afterward, with monthly check-ins. Do you understand these terms?" Mark nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Don't thank me, the judge said kindly but firmly. Thank yourself for doing the hard work. And thank Ms. Reyes for stepping in when your children needed her. Court is adjourned. As they exited the courtroom, Mark turned to Emma, tears shining in his eyes. I don't know what to say. When you agreed to help watch the boys, I thought it was temporary. I never imagined you'd become so important to them, to us. They're remarkable children, Emma said simply. They made it easy to care. The arrangement I mentioned, about them staying with you sometimes, I should have discussed it with you. First, if it's too much, it's perfect, Emma interrupted. I was worried about not seeing them anymore. Relief washed over Mark's face. Good. That's good, because I think they'd be devastated if you suddenly disappeared from their lives, especially after everything else they've lost. Before Emma could respond, the door to the judge's chambers opened, and Jason and Mikey burst out, running to their father. Mark dropped to one knee, gathering them both in a fierce hug. Are we going home? Jason asked, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. Yes, buddy, Mark confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. We're going home, but we're going to do things a little differently this time. As Emma watched the reunion, a complicated mix of joy and loss tightened her chest. She was genuinely happy for the family. This was the outcome they had all worked toward. Yet the thought of her apartment without the boys' voices, without Mikey's stuffed animals scattered across the couch, or Jason's careful stack of library books on the coffee table, created a hollow feeling she hadn't anticipated. Miss Emma? Mikey had detached himself from his father and was tugging at her hand. Are you coming home with us? Emma knelt to his level. Not today, sweetheart. Today is special time for you and Jason and your dad, but I'll see you very soon. I promise. Dad said we can still stay with you sometimes, Jason said, his perceptive eyes studying her face. Is that true? Absolutely, Emma assured him, relieved that Mark had already discussed the arrangement with the boys. We still have to teach Lily how to play that new board game. Remember? Jason nodded, satisfied. And feed Fernando when Mrs. Rodriguez visits her daughter. Exactly, Emma smiled, touching his cheek gently. This isn't goodbye. It's just a new chapter. The transition happened gradually, as the judge had ordered. First overnight visits at Mark's new apartment, then weekends, then whole weeks with Emma checking in daily. By the end of the 30 days, the boys were officially home with their father, with Emma still a regular presence in their lives. Mark's new apartment was in a modest but well-maintained building, just 3 blocks from Emma's place. The location had been deliberate, close enough for the boys to maintain connections with Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez, but far enough from his old haunts to represent a fresh start. Emma visited on a Saturday afternoon in early spring, bringing a homemade lasagna and garlic bread for dinner. She knocked on the door of apartment 3B, smiling when she heard Mikey's excited voice calling, "It's Miss Emma! I'll get it!" The door flew open to reveal Mikey in superhero pajamas, though it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. We're having a pajama day, he announced by way of explanation. Dad said it's a Wilson family tradition. Is it now? Emma replied, stepping inside to find Mark and Jason sprawled on the living room floor amid a sea of Lego pieces. It is as of this morning, Mark admitted with a sheepish grin. We were all too lazy to get dressed, so I declared it an official tradition. The apartment was small but bright, with second-hand furniture arranged cozily around a television. Children's artwork hung on the refrigerator, and family photos, including several recent ones with Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez, dotted the walls. It felt like a home, not just a place to sleep. Dad, can I show Miss Emma my new bunk bed? Mikey asked, bouncing on his toes. Sure, buddy, Mark agreed, rising from the floor with a groan. I'm too old for Lego marathons anyway. While Mikey dragged Emma to see the bedroom he shared with Jason, Mark began clearing away the scattered toys. The tour was brief but enthusiastic, with Mikey demonstrating how he could climb to the top bunk, all by myself without even using the ladder, though Emma noticed the ladder was securely in place. Jason, never one for excessive enthusiasm, nevertheless showed quiet pride in their new space. Dad let us pick the paint color, he explained, gesturing to the light blue walls. And he built the bookshelf himself. The shelf in question was slightly lopsided, but sturdy, filled with library books and a few new purchases. Emma recognized titles she had read to the boys during their time with her. Your dad's doing a great job, she commented as they returned to the living room. Jason nodded seriously. He doesn't drink the special medicine anymore. and he only gets sad sometimes, not all the time. That's wonderful progress, Emma agreed, touched by Jason's matter-of-fact assessment. And guess what? Mikey chimed in. Grandma Jean is coming to visit next week. Dad says she lives in Florida where it's always hot, but she's coming just to see us. This was news to Emma. Your grandmother is visiting? That's exciting. Mark looked up from where he was stacking the last of the Lego pieces into a storage bin. My mother, he confirmed. We've been reconnecting. She's eager to be part of the boys' lives again. This development represented yet another step in the family's healing, Mark rebuilding not just his relationship with his sons, but with his own family. Emma felt a surge of pride for how far they had all come. Dinner was a lively affair, with Mikey recounting school adventures and Jason sharing facts from a book about sharks he'd been reading. Mark was more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him, laughing at his son's stories and adding his own commentary. The tension that had characterized their early interactions had faded, replaced by a genuine ease. As they cleaned up afterward, Mark lowered his voice so the boys, now watching a movie in the living room, couldn't hear. I've been meaning to thank you, he said, rinsing a plate before handing it to Emma to dry. Not just for everything you did for the boys, but for what you said at the hearing. It meant a lot. Coming from you. I only told the truth, Emma replied, focusing on drying the dish in her hands. You've worked hard to be the father they deserve. It's still a daily struggle, Mark admitted. There are moments when the grief hits so hard I can barely breathe. Times when a drink sounds like the only way to make it stop. But you don't, Emma pointed out. That's what matters. Mark nodded, passing her another plate. My sponsor says it gets easier with time. Not the missing Caroline part. That might never get easier. But the resisting temptation part. Learning to live with the pain instead of trying to numb it. They worked in companionable silence for a few moments before Mark spoke again. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, he said, his tone shifting to something more hesitant. It's about the custody arrangement with your ex-husband. Emma stiffened slightly. What about it? Jason mentioned that your court date is coming up. The annual review or something? He was worried it might affect your time with Lily. Emma sighed. She'd tried not to discuss her custody issues in front of the boys, but Jason was perceptive, to the point of being psychic sometimes. It's a standard review, she explained. David agreed to our current arrangement after meeting the boys, but he included a 6-month review clause, just to be cautious. He's concerned about Lily being around me, Mark guessed, his expression somber. An addict in recovery. Former addict, Emma corrected automatically, then sighed. But yes, that's part of it. He's always been overprotective, and the situation was unusual. Mark dried his hands on a dish towel, his movements deliberate. I'd like to meet him if you think it would help. He should know I'm not a threat to his daughter. The offer touched Emma deeply. That's very thoughtful, but not necessary. The review is mostly a formality at this point. Lily loves spending time with the boys, and David has seen how positive the relationship is for her. Mark nodded, though. He still looked troubled. If you change your mind, the offer stands. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for us. Later, as Emma prepared to leave, Mikey insisted on a bedtime story despite it being barely 7 o'clock. Just one, he pleaded. The one about the bear and the mountain. Emma relented, settling onto the edge of Mikey's bunk to read, while Jason listened from the lower bed, pretending to be more interested in his shark book, but clearly following along. From the doorway, Mark watched the domestic scene with an unreadable expression. When Emma finished the story and tucked Mikey in, she found Mark in the hallway, his eyes suspiciously bright. You know, he said quietly, when the judge asked about my plans for the boys, I mentioned them staying with you sometimes. What I didn't say was how much they need you in their lives. How much He paused, clearing his throat. How grateful I am that they have you. The intensity in his gaze made Emma slightly uncomfortable. Their relationship had always been defined by the children, by their shared concern for Jason and Mikey's welfare. This felt like something new, something undefined. They're amazing kids, she said, defaulting to the safe response. I'm just glad I can still be part of their lives. Mark seemed about to say something more, but was interrupted by Jason calling from the bedroom. Dad, can you check under my bed? Mikey says he heard a noise. The moment broken, Mark gave Emma a small smile. Duty calls. Monster inspection is a father's sacred responsibility. Emma gathered her purse and headed for the door. Tell the boys I'll see them on Wednesday for our regular afternoon. They'll be counting the hours. Mark assured her. We all will. As Emma walked the 3 blocks back to her apartment, she reflected on the curious family they had formed. Not traditional by any means, but somehow functioning, meeting the needs of children who had nearly fallen through society's cracks. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, Lily asking if the boys can come to her birthday party next month. Thoughts? Emma smiled, typing back. They'd love to. I'll check with their dad. Another text followed quickly. That review hearing next week is just a formality. Lily benefits from having siblings, even part-time ones. Just want you to know, or see that now. The message was as close to an apology as David would ever come for his initial reaction to her involvement with the Wilson family. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. One less battle to fight, one more piece falling into place in their unusual arrangement. She thought about Mark's expression as he watched her read to his sons, the unspoken words hanging between them. That was a complication she wasn't ready to consider, a potential shifting of boundaries that needed careful thought. For now, it was enough that the boys were where they belonged, with a father who was fighting his demons and winning, in a home filled with love instead of fear, with connections to people who cared deeply about their welfare. As Emma reached her building, Mrs. Rodriguez was just returning from walking Fernando in his special tortoise harness. The elderly woman smiled knowingly. How are our boys? She asked, emphasizing the possessive. Thriving, Emma replied honestly. And very much still ours, even as they become more fully their fathers again. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sagely. That is the mark of true family, querida. Not blood, but belonging. Those boys will always belong to all of us who helped save them. Emma couldn't have put it better herself. 6 months after the court hearing, Emma stood in her living room, carefully positioning a small frame on the wall. Inside was a worn piece of paper with childish handwriting. Please help my brother and me. Dad hasn't come home in 3 days. We're hungry and scared. Jason's note, the plea for help that had changed all their lives, now preserved behind glass as a reminder of how a single moment of connection could alter so many destinies. Is that the note? The voice came from behind her, startling Emma slightly. She turned to find Jason himself standing in the doorway, a backpack slung over one shoulder. At 9 years old now, he'd grown taller, his face losing some of its childlike roundness. But his eyes were still the same, thoughtful, observant, taking everything in. It is, Emma confirmed, straightening the frame. I hope you don't mind. It reminds me of how we all found each other. Jason approached, studying the framed note with a complicated expression. I was really scared that day, he admitted quietly. I didn't know if anyone would help us, but you were brave enough to try, Emma pointed out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. That's what matters. The boy shrugged, uncomfortable with praise as always. Dad sent me to tell you we're here. He's helping Mikey with his shoes, again. Emma smiled, picturing the scene. Mikey, now 6, still struggled with shoelaces despite constant practice. Tell them I'll be right down. Today was a milestone. Mark's 6-month sobriety chip ceremony at AA. He had invited Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez to attend, wanting the boys to see the community that had supported their father's recovery. Afterward, they were all going out for pizza to celebrate. As Jason headed back downstairs, Emma took one last look at the framed note. So much had changed since that day in the grocery store. Mark was now fully employed as a foreman at Carson's construction, supervising a crew and earning enough to support his family comfortably. He had maintained his sobriety for over a year, becoming a sponsor to newer AA members and speaking occasionally at recovery events. The boys spent most of their time with their father now, staying with Emma only on Wednesday afternoons and occasional weekends. But the connection remained strong. Phone calls, shared meals, celebrations of small victories and milestones. Emma's own life had transformed as well. Her promotion to assistant manager had led to further advancement. She was now the store's customer service director, with a salary that allowed her to finally build savings and even consider buying a small condo. Her custody arrangement with David had stabilized, with Lily spending every other weekend and one evening a week with her. The little girl had formed a close bond with the boys, as she still called them, treating them like the siblings she didn't have. Downstairs, Emma found Mark wrestling with Mikey's sneakers while the boy giggled uncontrollably. Stand still. Buddy, I can't tie them if you're dancing around. But it tickles, Mikey protested, squirming away. Jason stood nearby, already perfectly ready in a button-up shirt and neat jeans, watching the scene with fond exasperation. I told him to wear his Velcro shoes, but he wanted to match Dad. Indeed, Mark and Mikey were wearing nearly identical outfits, blue button-downs and khaki pants. Though Mark's shoes were decidedly more adult, the sight made Emma's heart twist. With affection. There, Mark announced triumphantly, finishing the second shoelace. Now stay tied, please, at least until after the ceremony. He straightened up, noticing Emma for the first time. Hey, you ready? Mrs. Rodriguez is meeting us there. All set, Emma confirmed, grabbing her purse. Jason was just admiring his note in its new frame. Mark's expression sobered. That note. Best mistake I ever made. Leaving it where he could find it. Worst thing I ever did. Putting him in a position to need to write it. Dad, Jason interrupted, his voice firm despite his youth. We talked about this. Remember what Ms. Chen says? We can't change the past, only learn from it. Mark smiled ruefully. When did you get so wise, kid? I've always been wise. Jason replied with the hint of a smirk. You just finally started listening. They all laughed, the moment of seriousness broken. As they headed out to Mark's car, a Tony used but reliable sedan he'd purchased 3 months ago, Emma marveled at how this makeshift family had healed together, each member growing stronger because of their connection to the others. The AA meeting was held in a church basement, a simple space with folding chairs arranged in a circle and a table with coffee and cookies in the corner. Mrs. Rodriguez was already there, saving them seats near the back. Mikey immediately claimed the chair beside her, while Jason sat between his father and Emma. The ceremony itself was brief but powerful. One by one, members celebrating sobriety milestones came forward to receive their chips, sharing brief reflections on their journey. When Mark's turn came, he walked to the center of the circle, the boys watching with undisguised pride. My name is Mark, and I'm an alcoholic, he began, the ritual phrase spoken with quiet dignity. Today, I'm celebrating 18 months of sobriety. Applause filled the room, and Mikey clapped so enthusiastically that Mrs. Rodriguez had to gently restrain him. When my wife died, Mark continued, I thought my life was over. I chose the bottle over my responsibilities, over my children's welfare. It took nearly losing them completely to wake me up. He glanced at Jason and Mikey, his eyes shining. But I'm grateful every day for second chances, for the people who stepped in when I couldn't be the father my boys deserved. His gaze shifted briefly to Emma, a look of such gratitude that she felt her cheeks warm. This chip isn't just mine, Mark concluded. It belongs to everyone who helped us find our way back to each other, especially to my sons, who never gave up on me even when I gave them every reason to. More applause followed as Mark received his chip, a simple bronze medallion that represented so much more than just time passed without drinking. It was a symbol of reclaimed responsibility, of a family rebuilt from broken pieces. After the ceremony, their celebratory dinner at Sal's Pizzeria was joyful chaos. Mikey insisted on ordering pineapple on his half of the pizza, to everyone else's mock horror. Mrs. Rodriguez regaled them with stories of Fernando's latest adventures, including his daring escape into the building's hallway. Lily, who had been dropped off by David to join the celebration, taught the boys a clapping game she'd learned at school. Watching them, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness. This unlikely gathering, a recovering alcoholic and his sons, an elderly teacher, a part-time mother, and a little girl who belonged to another family entirely, had somehow become one of the most stable elements of her life. Penny for your thoughts? Mark asked, sliding into the chair beside her while the children argued good-naturedly about which ice cream flavors to order. Just thinking about family, Emma replied honestly. How it comes in so many forms. Mark nodded, turning his sobriety chip between his fingers. I never thanked you properly, for taking that note seriously, for seeing my boys when no one else was looking. You've thanked me 1,000 times, Emma protested. With every day of sobriety, every effort to rebuild your family. Still, Mark insisted, his expression earnest. What you did wasn't just kindness, it was life-changing for all of us. There was something in his tone that made Emma pause, a current beneath the words that hinted at deeper feelings. She had noticed it increasingly in recent months, a lingering glance, a touch that lasted just a beat too long, an awareness between them that extended beyond their connection through the children. But before she could respond, Mikey bounded over, ice cream decision apparently settled. Dad, can Lily come to the park with us tomorrow, please? The moment broken, Mark turned his attention to his son. If her dad says it's okay, sure. Now, Did you decide on ice cream? Or are you still debating the critical vanilla versus chocolate question? As the evening continued, Emma found herself reflecting on the framed note hanging in her living room, a child's desperate plea that had set in motion events none of them could have predicted. A year and a half later, that same child sat across from her, laughing with his brother and friends, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, that his needs would be met, that the adults in his life would not fail him again, sometimes the most. Profound changes began with the smallest actions: a note slipping from a pocket, a cashier noticing a child in need, a community forming around a broken family to help make it whole again. The note would remain on Emma's wall, not as a reminder of past trauma, but as evidence of healing, of second chances seized, of families formed by choice rather than just by blood, of the remarkable resilience of children and the adults who love them. "Miss Emma," Jason called from across the table, interrupting her thoughts. "Dad says we can all go to the Science Museum next weekend. You'll come too, right?" "I wouldn't miss it," Emma assured him, meeting Mark's eyes briefly over the children's. Heads, whatever complicated feelings might be developing between them, could wait. For now, it was enough to celebrate how far they'd all come. Together, 1 year to the day after finding Jason's note, Emma stood in the community center's meeting room, surrounded by folding chairs arranged in a circle. She checked her watch nervously. 10 minutes until people would start arriving. The coffee was brewing, cookies arranged on a table by the wall, pamphlets stacked neatly beside sign-in sheets. "Relax," Mark said, entering with a stack of bottled water. "Everything looks perfect." "What if nobody comes?" Emma fretted, adjusting a chair that was already perfectly aligned. What if this whole idea was presumptuous? Mark set down the water bottles and placed his hands on Emma's shoulders, forcing her to stop fidgeting. "People will come. This is needed. You know that better than anyone." Today marked the first meeting of the support group Emma had organized. Bridge Families, she called it, a resource for people in situations like hers had been: temporary guardians, extended family members, neighbors or friends caring for children during parental crisis or recovery, people who fell into the gaps between traditional foster care and formal kinship placement. The idea had come to her during a conversation with Ms. Jennings, Jason and Mikey's former social worker. "Your case was unusual," Ms. Jennings had remarked. "Most times children in that situation would go straight into the system, but your arrangement actually worked better for everyone involved. There must be others in similar situations," Emma had mused. "People caring for children informally, without much support or guidance. More than you'd think," Ms. Jennings had confirmed. "The system can't always accommodate these arrangements, but they happen all the time." That conversation had planted a seed that grew into today's meeting, an informal support group where people could share resources, advice, and encouragement while navigating the complicated territory of temporary guardianship. Now, as Emma watched, the clock ticked closer to the 7 p.m. start time. She wondered if she'd overestimated the need. Mark, seeming to read her thoughts, squeezed her shoulders gently. "Even if only one other person shows up, it's worth doing," he reminded her. "And Jason and Mikey are bringing Mrs. Rodriguez in 15 minutes, so you're guaranteed at least 3 attendees." Emma laughed despite her nervousness. Very reassuring. The door opened, and a young woman entered hesitantly, a toddler balanced on her hip. "Is this the Bridge Families meeting?" Emma stepped forward, smiling warmly. "Yes, welcome. I'm Emma Reyes, the organizer. This is Mark Wilson." "Tasha Lewis," the woman replied, shifting the toddler to her other hip. "And this is my nephew, Deshaun. My sister's in rehab, so I've got him for a few months. Friend of mine saw your flyer at the library." Before Emma could respond, another arrival distracted her. An older couple, introducing themselves as the Harrises, grandparents suddenly caring for 3 grandchildren after their daughter's incarceration. Then a man about Emma's age, a high school teacher who had taken in a student whose parents had been deported, a divorced mother whose children shared a father with 2 half-siblings now temporarily in her care. Within 15 minutes, the circle of chairs was nearly full. 12 adults, plus several children who settled in a corner with toys and books Emma had provided. Each story was different, yet connected by a common thread: ordinary people stepping up in extraordinary circumstances to keep children safe, loved, and connected to their families of origin. When Jason, Mikey, and Mrs. Rodriguez arrived, the boys immediately gravitated toward the other children while the elderly woman joined the circle, contributing her perspective as a supportive neighbor in their unconventional arrangement. Emma began the meeting with her own story, finding Jason's note, the temporary guardianship, the gradual reunification with Mark. She spoke candidly about the challenges, financial strain, emotional attachment, navigating social services, balancing the children's needs with her own. The hardest part, she admitted, was feeling so alone in it, like I'd stumbled into this huge responsibility without a roadmap. That's why I wanted to create this group, so others would have the support I wished for during those first overwhelming weeks. Around the circle, heads nodded in recognition. One by one, others shared their stories, their struggles, their small victories. Resources were exchanged, names of understanding pediatricians, applications for assistance programs, strategies for maintaining children's connections with parents working toward reunification. Mark spoke last, offering the perspective of a parent on the other side of crisis. I'll always be grateful that my sons had a safe place to land when I couldn't provide one, he said, his voice steady. But I'm equally grateful that Emma saw me as someone worth helping too, not just a failure, to be replaced. That made all the difference in our ability to rebuild our family. After the formal meeting ended, people lingered, exchanging phone numbers and continuing conversations. Emma circulated among them, answering questions, making introductions, feeling a growing sense of accomplishment as connections formed before her eyes. "Miss Emma," Mikey called from the children's corner. "Come see what we made." The children had created a mural on butcher paper spread across one table. Handprints in various colors, names printed carefully beneath each one. "It's all our families," Mikey explained proudly, "even though they're all different." Emma examined the artwork, noting how the children had connected certain handprints with lines, creating their own visual representation of their complex family structures. In one corner, she spotted 3 handprints labeled Mikey, Jason, and Dad, connected by solid lines. Nearby were prints for Miss Emma, Mrs. R, and Lily, connected to the boys' prints with dotted lines. "This is beautiful," Emma told the children sincerely. "May we hang it up for the next meeting?" As the evening wound down and the last attendees departed with promises to return next month, Emma began gathering empty coffee cups and discarded napkins. Mark helped, working alongside her in comfortable silence. "You did a good thing here tonight," he said finally, tying off a garbage bag. "We did," Emma corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without you and the boys." Mark paused, leaning against the wall. "It's been exactly a year, you know. Since the note." "I know," Emma said softly. "That's why I chose today for the first meeting. It felt right, somehow." "A lot can change in a year," Mark observed, his gaze steady on her face. Emma thought about all the transformations the past 12 months had brought. Mark's sobriety, the boy's healing, her own evolution from solitary cashier to central figure in a complex family system, and now, founder of a community resource. "A lot has changed," she agreed, "all for the better." As they finished cleaning up, Jason approached, Mikey half asleep against his shoulder, despite being nearly too big for his brother to carry. "Dad, Mikey's crashing. Can we go home now?" "Of course, buddy," Mark said, taking the drowsy 6-year-old from his brother's arms. "Tell Miss Emma thank you for organizing everything." "Thank you," Jason said dutifully, then added with genuine feeling, "It was really good. Those other kids have people like you too." The simple observation, delivered in Jason's matter-of-fact way, touched Emma deeply. That's exactly right. Everyone deserves someone in their corner. Outside in the cool evening air, Mrs. Rodriguez said her goodbyes and headed toward her building, while Emma walked Mark and the boys to their car. As Mark secured a now sleeping Mikey in his booster seat, Jason hung back to walk beside Emma. "Miss Emma," he said quietly, "I'm glad I wrote that note." Emma put her arm around his shoulders, no longer the thin, frightened child she'd first met, but a growing boy with steady confidence. "I'm glad you wrote it too, and I'm even more glad that I found it." "Me too," Jason said simply, before climbing into the car beside his brother. As Emma watched them drive away, she felt the completion of a circle, crisis to resolution, desperation, to stability, strangers, to family. The note that had once represented fear and abandonment had transformed into a testament of hope and connection, not just for the Wilsons, but potentially for all the families who had gathered tonight, and those who would come in the future. Full circle indeed. "I never expected to be standing here today," Jason began, his voice steady despite the crowd of people watching him. At 11 years old, His lanky frame nearly matched Emma's height, though he still had the slightly awkward posture of a boy, growing too quickly for his coordination to keep up. 3 years ago, I was a scared kid with a little brother to protect, and no idea how to do it. Our dad was missing. We were hungry, and I wrote a note asking for help, not really believing anyone would answer. In the audience, Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. Beside her, Mark reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. On her other side, Mikey fidgeted in his seat, 9 years old now, and still incapable of sitting completely still for more than a few minutes. But someone did answer. Jason continued. Miss Emma found my note and followed me home. She could have called social services right away. She could have walked away. Instead, she helped us find our dad and gave us all a chance to become a family again. The community center was packed for the 3rd anniversary celebration of Bridge Families. What had begun as Emma's small support group had grown into a recognized community resource, partnering with social services to provide training, resources, and community connections for informal guardians and the families they supported. Today's event honored those who had been part of the program since its inception. Among them were Lisa and Amber, now stable in a small apartment with Lisa working full-time at Carson's Construction and Amber attending community college part-time. Tyler, now 10, sat beside Mikey, the two having become inseparable friends over the past 3 years. Mrs. Rodriguez was there too, now using a cane but still sharp as ever, with Fernando the tortoise represented by a photo on the memorial table. He had passed peacefully the previous winter at the venerable age of 23. Several of the original Bridge Families attendees had returned to share their stories, along with dozens of new families who had found support through the program. The thing I've learned, Jason was saying, his composure remarkable for a middle schooler, addressing a crowded room, is that families don't have to look like what you see on TV. Sometimes they're made up of different pieces that fit together in their own way. My family now includes my dad and my brother, but also Miss Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez and even Lily, who stays with us sometimes. From her seat near the front, Lily, now 9, gave a little wave that made the audience chuckle. Bridge Families taught me that it's okay for things to be complicated sometimes, Jason concluded, that getting help isn't something to be ashamed of, and that one small action, like writing a note or stopping to help someone, can change everything. As Jason returned to his seat amid enthusiastic applause, Emma rose to take the podium. Looking out at the gathered families, some still in crisis, others emerging from difficult times, some now stable enough to mentor newer members, she felt a profound sense of purpose. When Jason slipped that note from his pocket 3 years ago, I had no idea how it would change all our lives, she began. I was just a tired cashier having a rough day, who happened to notice a child in need. That moment connected us to each other, and eventually to all of you. Emma gestured to the room. Each of you has your own version of that moment, a decision to step in, to help, to build a bridge rather than a wall. Whether you're a grandparent suddenly raising grandchildren, a neighbor providing safe harbor during a family crisis, or a friend who became family when it mattered most, you represent the best of what community can be. The formal presentations continued with recognition of program volunteers and community partners, followed by a potluck lunch where families mingled and connected. Emma circulated among them, offering encouragement here, resources there, the occasional hug when words weren't enough. She eventually found herself at the dessert table beside Mark, both of them watching as Jason helped younger children construct elaborate ice cream sundaes. He's come so far, Emma observed, pride evident in her voice. Remember how he used to flinch when anyone moved too quickly? How he wouldn't let Mikey out of his sight? Mark nodded, his expression softening. Sometimes I still see that scared 8-year-old in him, especially when he gets overprotective of Mikey. But mostly I see this amazing, thoughtful kid who somehow survived the worst of me and came out stronger. Not just survived, Emma corrected gently. Thrived, because he had people who believed in him, including you, especially now. Mark's sobriety had held firm for nearly 3 years, his commitment to recovery unwavering. He had been promoted twice at Carson's, now supervising multiple crews and mentoring other employees in recovery. The haunted look that had once shadowed his eyes had faded, replaced by quiet confidence and genuine peace. We make a good team, he said, echoing words he'd spoken to her many times over the years. This time, however, he added something new. I've been thinking maybe we should make it official. Emma turned to him, startled. What do you mean? Mark reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I mean this. Not now. Not with everyone. Around. But soon. If you're ready. Emma stared at the box, her heart racing. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past 3 years. From co-guardians to friends, to something deeper. They had been dating officially for 18 months, taking things slowly out of consideration for the children and their complex history. The boys split time between their apartments, and they functioned as a family in many ways already. But marriage, that was a step she hadn't allowed herself to consider, afraid of complicating the delicate balance they had achieved. The boys? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark smiled. They helped pick out the ring. Jason's exact words were, "Dad, it's about time. Miss Emma's practically our mom anyway." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. And Lily, her daughter, now spending equal time with her and David under their revised custody agreement, had grown close to the Wilson family over the years. Lily said she's always wanted brothers, and this would make it official, Mark replied, his eyes crinkling with amusement, though she specified that as the only girl, she should get her own room when we eventually move in together. A laugh escaped Emma despite her emotional state. She's always been practical, so what do you say? Mark asked, suddenly looking nervous. Not an answer now. I want to do this properly, with dinner and everything, but I needed you to know where my heart is. Emma reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. My heart is in the same place, she assured him, has been for longer than I've admitted, even to myself. Their moment was interrupted by Mikey barreling into them, ice cream smeared across his chin. Dad, Miss Emma, can Tyler sleep over tonight, please? He's got a new video game. We'll discuss it after the event, Mark replied, quickly pocketing the ring box. Go clean your face, buddy. You're wearing more ice cream than you ate. As Mikey dashed off, Jason approached more sedately, his perceptive gaze moving between the adults. Did you ask her? He inquired quietly. Not officially, Mark admitted, but I gave her a preview. Jason nodded approvingly. Good. Mrs. Rodriguez says it's about time you two stopped pretending you're just friends. Emma laughed, wiping away a stray tear. Mrs. Rodriguez should mind her own business. You are her business, Jason replied, with the simple wisdom that continually surprised them. We all are. That's what family means. Later that evening, after the community center had been cleaned and the last families had departed with leftovers and resource pamphlets, Emma returned to her apartment alone. Mark had taken the boys home to prepare for Tyler's sleepover, promising to call her later. In the quiet of her living room, Emma's gaze was drawn to the framed note on her wall, Jason's, childish handwriting preserved as a reminder of where their journey had begun. Beside it now hung other mementos, a photo of all of them at Mikey's 8th birthday party, a crayon drawing from Lily titled My Big Family, a certificate recognizing Bridge families as a community partner of the year. Emma traced the words of the note with her fingertip, marveling at how a moment of desperation had transformed into such profound connection. One small boy's courage in asking for help, one tired cashier's decision to follow him home, one father's commitment to recovery and rebuilding. So many small choices that had collectively changed the course of all their lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Boys finally asleep. Tyler brought 2 video games, not just one. Pretty sure there'll be zombies tomorrow. Emma smiled, typing back. Sounds like a normal sleepover to me. Everything okay otherwise? The reply came quickly. Everything's perfect. I love you. Can't wait. For our dinner tomorrow night. The simple message warmed her from within. I love you too. And yes to dinner. And to the question you haven't officially asked yet. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, Jason says, that's cheating and I have to do it properly anyway. With the whole bending knee thing, Emma laughed out loud. Happiness bubbling up irrepressibly. Jason is a wise young man. Listen to him. As she prepared for bed that night, Emma reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her here, from a lonely, overworked cashier to the center of a vibrant, unconventional family and a growing community support network. None of it would have happened if she had ignored Jason's note or called social services immediately instead of following her instincts. That single moment of connection, of seeing a child in need and choosing to help rather than look away, had rippled outward to touch countless lives beyond her own. The boys, Mark, Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily, Lisa and her family, and all the Bridge families who had found support and community through their shared experiences. One small action, One life-changing choice, one note that had fallen from a desperate child's pocket at exactly the right moment, into exactly the right hands. As Emma drifted toward sleep, she thought about what her answer would be tomorrow night when Mark officially proposed. Yes, of course, but more than that. A commitment to the family they had built together from broken pieces, a promise to keep building bridges wherever they were needed, an acknowledgement that sometimes the most profound connections begin in the most unexpected moments, and a deep gratitude for a tired cashier and a small boy who had found each other when they needed it most.